Do you want to switch seats so she can hit you?
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna call the Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023 City Council meeting to order. Gavin is not gonna be here tonight. He has a conflict with his paying job, so he is there tonight, and so we will soldier on without him. Start with the roll call.
Brooke Brown here.
Alec Robinson.
Kevin Glasheen.
Phil McDuffie.
Sarah Hudson. Okay, agenda, do we have any public comment? Michaela? No, okay. Then we will bring up agenda item number 2, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the fiscal year 2021-2022 audit by ABIP.
Amy Portillo wants to make a public comment, but she's going to be late, and she wanted me to mention that she might come and comment later if she can.
Amy Patillo?
Patillo, that's
Okay.
yeah. She's got another committee meeting, like the MOPAC meeting tonight, I think, and then she's going to come after that.
Okay. Well, we will deal with that when she gets here. Okay, back to agenda item number 2.
Sure. Oh, wow, that's very loud. Every time.
So,
Can you turn me down? Okay, thank you.
Jeremy Barbato?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Thank you, Council, for having me here today. In front of you, have 2 documents. Well, first, let me show this. My name is Jeremy Barbato. I'm an audit senior manager with ABIP, the audit firm conducting the independent financial audit for the city of Rollingwood for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2022. Mike Del Toro is the partner over the engagement, but he had a conflict, and he sent me to take the rewards for the presentation here. In front of you have 2 documents. One is on our letterhead. It's a stapled letter. I want to cover that first, and then we'll talk about the bound document. This is our required communication with those charged with governance over the city. This is our communication on how the audit went. I'll summarize each paragraph, but I can go in more detail if you'd like. You just got this letter today, so. First paragraph basically states what our scope of our services, and that's audit the financial statements of the governmental activities, the business type activities, and the discretely presented component unit, and each major fund for the fiscal year September 30th for the city of Rollingwood. Accounting policies are, and there's estimates in these financial statements. There was a new accounting policy we had to adopt this year. Nothing to y'all's fault. It's just, it was required by the Government Accounting Standards Board, and that is standard statement number 87 over leases. So we did implement that, and those are included in your bound financial statements for the fiscal year to comply with generally accepted accounting principles. Like I said, accounting estimates are a key part of your financial statements. We evaluate those and believe they're fair, consistent, and neutral with those of prior years. Those estimates being your accumulated depreciation over your fixed assets, your estimated useful life over those fixed assets, and allowance for doubtful accounts over the property taxes and accounts receivable. On the next page, if we had any difficulties in performing the audit, we'd be required to communicate that to you. We are happy to say we had no difficulties in performing the audit. If we had any uncorrected or corrected misstatements that were material to the financial statements, we were required to communicate that to you as well. Management has made all our adjusting journal entries. None of them were material in the financial statements. We had no disagreements with management, and management did not seek independent accountant's opinion on we call that opinion shopping, or getting a second opinion. To our knowledge, that didn't happen during the fiscal year. The last page is just another comment, and it's basically a tip of the cap to management on compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act. We do an audit over the Public Funds Investment Act to make sure the city complies with the training requirements. The investment policy is transparent with that act, and that the city's investing in accordance with that act. And we're happy to say that the city complied with the provisions of the Public Funds Investment Act. Any questions over the letter I covered? The next is the bound document. I do want to point out at the top right, it does say final draft. That's really just a formality. We typically don't come with final reports until it's approved by the city council. So the numbers are solid. We've gone over them with management. We're confident in the numbers that we audited. The final draft is really just a formality. I'm going to start on page 1. It's actually a couple pages in. This is our independent auditor's report. The first paragraph is the most important paragraph. It's our opinion over the bound document you have here. Basically states that we audited the financial statements for the city of Rollingwood and for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2022, and we feel that they are in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles in the United States. Management is responsible for these financial statements. Our responsibility is to conduct an audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. We do issue some required supplementary information that is included in this bound report and supplementary information, and we did audit those informations in relation to the basic financial statements themselves. We also issued another report for the government auditing standards, and that's basically looking at your controls and over your contracts and compliance and other matters and that's on page 65. And that's also a clean opinion. No significant deficiencies or material weaknesses identified during our review of the city's internal controls. Next, I was going to go over page 18, just kind of highlight the general fund. This is the balance sheet as of September 30th, 2022. Total assets was $4.4 million. I do want to point out that because of the adoption of GASB 87, we did include the lease receivable on the books for the athletic fields contract that we have, and that is $222,000 projected out over the next, I think, 7 years. I think it turns in 2030. So we did record that in accordance with GASB statement number 87. But you can see most of your asset balance is embedded in your cash. So very healthy balance sheet and liquid balance sheet. Total unassigned fund balance for the general fund was $1.8 million. That equates to roughly 8 months operating reserves. Another very healthy indicator of the city. GFOA, which governs governments, typically recommends anywhere from 3 to 6 months operating reserves, and you're north of the 6-month mark, so very healthy fund balance. On the next page, page 20, flipping the page here is your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Just want to highlight a couple things. Last year's total revenues was $2.4 million. This year's was 3.1, excuse me. So that's an increase of about $600,000 from last year. Most of that we saw was in our property and sales tax, as well as our intergovernmental contract revenues, and that's the COVID money that came in. Total expenditures was $2.7 million. That was up from 2.3 of last year. Again, most of that increase was related to the spending of the COVID money in the public safety department. The rest of the document kind of highlights kind of the financial statement information that I covered here today. I can go over any questions you may have over that. I wasn't going to cover them in detail.
Anybody have anything? Brooke?
I would like you to just walk us through this lease revenue.
Sure.
I think it was on page
15.
37. I'm not sure I understand how that works.
Okay, the note 6?
Yes.
Okay. So, because of GASB 87, the government accounting standard boards felt that these lease contracts are of value to the city, right? So you entered an agreement with, I believe it was the Softball Corporation.
Western Hills.
Yeah, to lease out the athletic fields. And that's a 9-year, 10-year maybe, 10-year commitment. And I think we're in year like 7 of that. So we kind of just spell out what the terms of the agreement were in this footnote. So our lease receivable, we will be realizing 26,000 a year, roughly 26,000 a year, 27,000, up until we exhaust that full 222,000 that is sitting on our balance sheet.
Okay.
The lease, and then the lease interest is the 37,808 left on the agreement. The combined of that is still the same cash flow in accordance with the agreement. You're still getting the same monthly payment. It's just broken up between principal and interest now, just like a debt instrument would be. That's really the only indicator or change in the reporting.
So, Brooke, are you good?
I'm through.
Okay. So those cash flows are discounted,
Exactly.
and what's the discount rate?
The discount rate we used was 4%. Yes, it's disclosed here, 4%.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. Is this something that we're required to capitalize or and put on our books as, you know, an
Yes.
asset?
That's what he
Okay.
said.
Yeah, it came into effect for the fiscal year 22.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not like a choice then.
No, if you didn't adopt it, it's material enough, we would have to disclaim our opinion on a financial
Okay.
statement, saying you're not in compliance,
Okay.
so.
It doesn't have any practical effect for us, though.
Not for your budgeting or anything like that for the general fund, the cash flows are exactly the same, we're just showing them as principal and interest rather than lease revenue. Which is how you were accounting for them in years past.
Any other questions?
I move we approve the annual financial report.
Second.
So I don't know that we approve it. I think we accept it.
Oh.
Accept it.
Yeah.
I
Can
move
we-
we accept the annual financial report.
As submitted.
Are you second again?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, motion
Sorry.
second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, I'd just like to give a quick thank you to Abel, of course, for his work throughout the year to make our financial, position the way it is, but also for the rest of staff too. During the audit, it is quite a bit of work pulling together schedules and information. So appreciate everyone for helping us pull that together this year. Thanks. Thank you.
All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. We have two items on there.
Item 3,
Oh, sorry. Skipped right over that. Never mind. Number 3, presentation and update from Denton Navarro, Brookta, Bernal, and Zek PC regarding new certification opportunity related to open meetings training.
So I had mentioned to the mayor, I don't know, what, about a month ago, I guess? A little over a month ago, a couple months ago maybe. Anyway, our open meetings training that we do is certified by the Texas Attorney General to comply with the open meetings training requirements for newly elected and appointed officials. And so I wanted to make y'all aware that if y'all wanted to have some sort of, large training for your planning and zoning and your board of adjustments and city council, we can provide that training for them, and it is certified by the Texas Attorney General.
So
That's it. That's all I have.
details.
Cost.
It's
How-
just,
how
the cost
long?
is just my time because the presentation's already put together, so we don't have to put anything together. So it takes about an hour to get through it, plus or minus, depending on questions. So you're talking about cost of 2 hours of time
Okay.
for if we did it in one batch, we have it to everybody. That way everybody could hear the questions. And I prefer the training in person like that as opposed to them just going online and doing it, because you can't ask questions if you do the online training. And so, a couple hours of time.
Question, do we have to do that training every year?
No, the statute doesn't say that. Just once you're elected, you're required, every time you're
Once.
elected, you're required to
Once,
do it.
okay.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
Every
Just
time
once.
you're elected?
Yes, if,
Okay.
after every election.
It works, yeah.
Maybe I did it, I don't remember.
And so, just wanted to make y'all aware that,
Okay.
that was available. It's, you know, we've been providing that training for years and years and years. And we had to, after the laws changed last legislation, we had to submit new, PowerPoint presentations to the AG for them to certify it, which we got back a couple months ago as certified, so. And we can give out certificates saying that you've complied with the requirements.
So people that are not elected but are appointed.
So if they have to comply with the Open Meetings Act, that's gonna be your Planning and Zoning Commission, that's gonna be your Zoning Board of Adjustment, that's gonna be obviously City Council. I don't think you have any,
I think it's all of our boards.
but
and
y'all have an
commissions.
ordinance that requires all your boards to comply with the Open Meetings Act. So to that extent, because of the local requirement, they all have to comply. So that would include your appointed officials.
Right, but they are not elected.
They're
So
not,
how frequently do they have to have? Because, you know, people get appointed to a board or commission and they have like a 6-year
sure.
window that they can continue to serve.
Sure, under state law, I would say every time they're reappointed, they would have to if they're required under state law to take the training.
But state law doesn't require them to take the training.
Only if they're considered a local government under the statute, and that would be again,
Just
your Planning and
PUC.
Zoning Commission and your Zoning Board of
Board of
Adjustment are
Adjustment.
probably the only two under state law that would be required to do it. Under your locally adopted ordinance, I think it just says they have to take the training, so I guess arguably if you take it once, you don't have to take it every time. Although I certainly recommend taking it every couple of years because changes are made by the legislature, and
Well,
you need to be
and
aware
if-
of those changes.
If state law requires them to have it, it seems like that would be the same as
Yes, ma'am, that's a good point,
the
yes.
requirements for
Mhm.
council members, so
Certainly.
every 2 years for, if they're appointed at the beginning of a term,
Yes, ma'am,
would be every 2 years, so.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that something that we could schedule, Ashley? I feel like that would be really helpful because we have seen instances in recent memory of confusion, misunderstanding of what the rules are about the Opens Meeting Act,
There has
with the public as well as with, you know, potentially with board and commission and council members, and it would be nice to have an overall, everybody gets the same training at the same time and can
Here's
ask
all the
questions
questions.
and,
You're the same answer.
right.
Mhm.
Of
We
course.
hope.
We can schedule that. We can work to schedule something that works with, you know, most of our boards or commissions, and we can post it in a way that everybody could attend the training. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, anybody in the city, you know.
Of course.
People, future potential board and commission members and council you know, I
Sure.
mean, anybody.
Good
would be-
idea.
and if it's a public meeting, it's recorded, and so that's another just great resource to have that maybe goes a little bit above and beyond the video that most just watch for the requirement.
Right. I guess we are not.
I don't think we need
are not
action, but we
posted
can
for action, but
proceed with that.
Anybody else have comments about trying to offer that?
I
Sounds
think
like
it's a
good
very
idea.
good idea. I think it'd be fun to do it together. More fun than online.
Yeah, listening to that violin.
As long as they provide lunch.
It's an hour. You don't have to have lunch. Okay, well, maybe
We'll
we
take care
could
of
do that before a council meeting or,
Do like an hour early or,
yeah,
okay.
something like that. I think that would be a good idea.
Okay,
Okay,
we will get that scheduled.
all right, thank you. Now we will move on to the consent agenda. The two items 4 and 5, discussion and possible action on the minutes from the February 15th, 2023 City Council meeting, and discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending section 34-36 of the city's Code of Ordinances to bring it into compliance with the lead ban language for pipes and pipe fittings in Title 30, Texas Administrative Code, Section 290.44B. Do I have a motion?
Move approval of consent agenda.
Have a second?
Second.
All right, Motion is second. Any discussion? No? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I be recognized to request a brief 15-minute recess so that we might celebrate the upcoming nuptials of our city administrator collectively?
You may.
Wow.
All right.
All right. Okay. Let's
It's a party.
We will recess for 15 minutes. Okay. Okay. We will call the meeting back to order at 7:43 after having celebrated Ashley.
That was lovely. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I love you guys.
We're
Well,
happy for you.
Okay. We will now call up agenda item number 6. Discussion and possible action on a work authorization from K-Freeze and Associates for design, bid, and construction phase services for packages 1 through 4 of the water CIP and authorize the mayor to execute a professional services agreement. And Greg Blackburn is going to speak, and I am recusing myself from this again.
Good evening, council. So we're bringing this proposal back after going back and taking a look at it after our last meeting. Had some comments and concerns about it. So just hitting on some highlights of that changed. One of the big ones is we decided to change direction on the surveying and went to another firm that we work with regularly, and were able to reduce the cost for this design survey pretty substantially, which is great news. And then additionally, as requested, we included bid and construction phase services to the proposal, so y'all can see the total package for what it will take to get these packages from design all the way through construction. So you'll see that included as well. And that, any questions?
And may I speak to this, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, you may.
Well, I want to thank you for working with us to go over the contract, and that was great that you guys saved, I think, $80,000 on the rebidding the survey, so thank you for doing that. And then including the construction bid and supervision services, that was good. We had a meeting with Ashley and with you guys to go over that proposal. And I think generally what we're agreed on in that phase was to do a not to exceed without further authority number, which I think started at about 80, but that included daily inspections. We went to like weekly inspections and monthly contract administration meetings where you're going to meet with Ashley and the contractor to approve the monthly bill payments and plan the next month's work, which I think is going to be sufficient for everybody. And so that number dropped to about 30,000, is it, or
Just under 40,000.
40? Okay, so that's great. So I think basically we've saved 120,000 since the last proposal, so that's wonderful. Appreciate you all working hard at that to make that happen.
Absolutely.
And I would say that having done that work with them on the contract and with Ashley, you know, I certainly think that it's a reasonable contract and a good proposal that I would support.
Anybody else?
So we have a motion?
That's what I was gonna ask.
I move that we adopt the proposal and authorize staff to execute a contract consistent with the proposal.
The mayor.
The mayor,
The mayor.
correct.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, the motion is second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I abstain. All right.
All right. Thank
Thank
you all
you.
very much. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
There
Grab
is,
some cake if you didn't get it.
there is one other thing we did discuss about that, and that is, if I may, the legislature's got a $36 billion surplus, and there is a bill to fund a lot of money into the Water Development Board to fund infrastructure projects across Texas, such as ours. I know we'd applied, talking to Ashley, that we'd applied to the Water Development Board for a grant to do our water project previously, and it was denied, but there were some difficulties, I think, with the whole administration of the application process and deadlines and this and that. And they didn't have an extra billions of dollars at the time. So the session that's in session now is going to end in May, and we'll know whether that bill passes. Right now, the bill is got a non-specific number in it, so we'll have to see. But the engineering services are going to take 6 months anyway, and since they're going to cost about $400,000, my suggestion would be that we consider paying for those services out of pocket and deferring the bond until this fall, when we see if that bill passes, have another application into the development board, see if we can get them to pay for our construction phase of this project. And Abel has assured us that we could manage the cash flow to do that. So that's just something to think about and be aware of, is it might
For sure.
be we could save $5 million of bonding and get a grant.
Sure. And I did speak to someone who has helped in the past with applications and things like that for the Water Development Board. They've said we're interested at a really good time. We're starting early in kind of their usual process, I think is a early March application. And so we're in a good spot right now to get all of our ducks in a row, get every project we can think of out there. There's also going to be some drainage money that we can also look at. And so hopefully with any luck, our application is considered more with extra funding, so.
That's great.
And does that include the possibility of hiring a consultant to help make sure that our application is as solid as it can be?
You'll have to let us know, Ashley, because you're going to have to run with that.
Sure, of course.
So if you need anything.
Right, and depending on the timeline, that may be something we can budget for in the budget process and have ready for us October 1, depending on what that timeline is, so. When we had worked earlier, it's not outrageous to get help with these. They have I think they're called a PIF. It's just like an early project form. They're not overly complicated, but it is good to have somebody that has, some history working on those with the Water Development Board. So likely that would be our best bet to kind of get some help with those.
Okay, let us know.
For sure.
Thank you.
And do you have any idea of the rough cost of that, should we get to that stage?
I don't currently. I know previously there was one option before us that was about $4,200 for an application for help. So I don't think it would be outrageous. It wouldn't be anything that we couldn't budget for.
Great. Thanks.
Mhm.
It saves us millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Might
a
be
little
worth
bit
it.
upfront.
Might be, we may have support for that.
Right.
And I had are there projects associated with that grant application? I was thinking that we had talked about looking to the Water Development Board for perhaps funds that would help us raise the bridge on Edge Grove.
That's another possibility. I
Yes.
think the more projects you have, the better, and I think we'll be in a better spot this time with the CIP because that one is more shovel ready at that point. But we may be
Okay.
able to throw other ones in there, and I guess if we probably had some preliminary work done, it would be more advantageous. But we can absolutely research all the different ways we can get our foot in the door in really any of those projects.
Good.
Wasn't the Edge Grove project more in conjunction with TxDOT and those organizations to try to?
It's our road. It's not a TxDOT road, but it might be because it's closer to Bee Cave Road. It might be more in conjunction with something that they're doing that we might have the opportunity to.
Right.
But that does, now that you're mentioning that does sound familiar. Like we were considering those at one time.
Right.
So, but yes, we'll look into that for sure.
Good.
All right. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Good night.
Okay, on to agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on a resolution amending the fee schedule to reflect proposed updates to building and development and related fees. Ashley.
All right, so since Nikki has been here, she has been kind of going through our building and development department and looking for anything that needs attention or can be easily fixed in our building process. This time we have been working on some amendments to our fee schedule. This is not on the heels of a fee study or anything. These are just kind of small practical fixes that we could make to our fee schedule right now. I'm happy to walk you through a few of them. One of the very first amendment here would allow for us to charge contractor fees whenever we have someone, say, who's doing a project and they just want to meet with our engineers. And it may, speed up the process. It might lead to fewer reviews, but that way we can pass on those costs to them and not have to, bear the cost of those because they're not in our fee schedule. So this would allow us to do that. We added some minimal fees for technology, the My Government Online administration, just to cover our costs with My Government Online. We've added in some things that we're already doing that might be in our ordinances but just aren't in our fee schedule. Simple trade permits. I do want to call your attention to item 6 under A2001 general fees. This would allow us to, if required, to bill a contractor for any additional building surveys required. This could include height, setbacks, different things like that. So we're adding that in here as a proposed option. Everything else is kind of just a cleanup again. The final drainage criteria manual, we generally do have a site inspection by an engineer. That's just never been reflected in our fee schedule before, so this would just cover the cost of an engineer, making sure that the drainage plans and everything for a final project, we're good to go and be on site. We've also added in for notifications. That seems to be one of the higher cost initiatives here when we have variances or zoning requests, and so we've put in some proposed options for notification fees, so per mailed notification, and then also for publishing in the newspaper at the cost of the publishing. So if there are any questions on any of these fees, I'm happy to elaborate or have Nikki come up and discuss further.
I didn't have any questions on the fees. I did notice one that when really we have a $1 fee for copy of an occupancy certificate. That almost feels like it costs more to collect that than it
Right.
does. It's like
I'm sure we
a
maybe
negative
don't
return
charge.
on that one.
Yes.
Raise it.
Yeah.
I think that was more so like when we actually had to print them out and do that, so
I
we
think
don't necessarily do that anymore, we just kind of hit send, so.
Right.
we could drop it to 50 cents. So.
Take it up.
Looks good.
Right. Any questions?
Looks good.
Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the resolution 230322-07 amended fee schedule as submitted.
Yes.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. All right, on to agenda item number 8. Discussion and possible action regarding the addition of a building height survey requirement to the city's code of ordinances. Ashley.
Now that we have passed this fee schedule amendment that included the A20016, which is the site and or building survey fee, we are proposing that we put into our building process a height inspection. We can kind of go back and work on the details, but we would like to come back with a recommendation to you all for an actual ordinance amendment. And so we wanted to just get some direction from the city council on how to draft that. Our recommendation would likely include that not necessarily every new residential require a height survey, but if it reaches a certain threshold. So our thought is 5 feet within the maximum allowable height. That would allow, if y'all were to change something in one of those height regulations, this would stay, constant. It would just be if it's within 5 feet. And we would also probably recommend from a staff perspective, giving the optionality of either them to provide the survey or for the city to provide it and charge. But that is something we'd like some direction from you guys on.
I personally like the idea of the city calling for the survey because then it's done at our direction instead of at the direction of the builder.
Sure.
Agreed.
And particularly if, there's questions about raising the floor elevation and what the natural grade was and how you measure it. It'd be
Mhm.
better to have consistency
Sure.
of our own surveyor.
So what do we have surveyed right now? I mean, when do they do, form checks or what other?
Currently, Nikki, and I'll have you pop up here for the survey questions, but I believe currently they just do a form survey, or they do a survey at the beginning to show the original grade of the property. Is that correct?
Yes, so
Okay.
they'll do an original survey. Usually within that survey, they will show the trees, the topography, anything that may be on the site. Sometimes they will show the setbacks, excuse me, not the setbacks, the easements. Those are usually generally taken from the plat, so they're put on there. And then the second survey that's done is the form survey at the time forms are done and they're doing the layout.
But we're not surveying building height at all?
No, ma'am. Oh, no,
And-
sir.
And we're not, and we're not surveying any of the problem is if we're gonna survey or the current ordinance, you have to survey a 5-foot perimeter around the house too, is that right?
They would, well, yes, they would have to shoot, they would have to, you know, meet our definition of height, right? And so if it talks about from the original elevation to the top, we would come back with the parameters of that so that it was a very, you know, accurate. Here's the points we need surveyed, and that way we would have the calculations correct.
And
But-
hopefully they can simplify that whenever P and Z amends our building height ordinance.
Yes, hopefully.
Well, we amend it
Well,
True.
at their recommendation, but,
But yes, we intend to
Or
craft,
or against their recommendation.
well,
but
we
yes,
will be working together to get that changed.
but yeah, we intend to craft something that would be evergreen, you know, regardless of those kind of changes, or would be simple to amend.
I think this is a good idea, and I don't, thank you, Dave Bench, send in the letter requesting that, recommending that. I think that's a good idea.
Any other thoughts, Dave?
Fundamentals before finesse.
Okay.
Sounds good. So what's on the survey for the grade of the natural lay of the land, like are those 5-foot increments as far as the topo or what?
Typically, they're 5 foot.
Okay. That's just. what
Except when they are like a steeper grade, they'll go by 1.
Okay. All right. And that, yeah, once again, we're back to whatever we have on our ultimate regulations. We'll try to figure out if that's gonna be accurate enough. Is there any thought or desire to do that with LiDAR or anything like that, or? No.
I do
Okay.
not know.
All
That's
right.
gonna be under the survey.
We'll leave that up to our survey professionals, probably.
Got it. Okay.
Those are
right.
definitely parameters you could put in.
Sure.
Okay. We have a motion?
Yeah.
Somebody want to give us a motion?
What is it, to approve?
It
So they would be
To
bringing
draft.
back a draft ordinance
Okay.
to require this
Right, and it's
to
just,
site survey.
the city
height
would
survey.
be the one ordering the survey in that case, it seems.
So I move that we direct city staff to or direct whoever, legal, who is it? City staff to
Whoever.
direct legal to draft an ordinance and that the city hires the surveyor to perform those duties, not leave it up to the builder.
For a building height survey.
Right. Yes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes.
I have one further thought on this, and that is that we ask staff to also come back with a budget amendment that would allow us to authorize hiring of a surveyor when you bring back the ordinance.
Well,
Wouldn't
except
this
that
be a pass-through fee?
It's a pass-through, right?
It-
Because we just added that cost to
It
the
would
fee
be-
schedule.
It will be a pass-through, but I still think we
We'd have
need a
to-
budget amendment.
We would, and I'm wondering, maybe we would give an estimate this year, because it would just depend on how many we had come through, but, we can look at what we need to bring back, I suppose, or, and it may go into another one of our building
Line item.
fees, a line item that's already there, but yes,
Okay.
we will consider that and make sure that we have done what we need to do. budget-wise, okay.
All right. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to agenda item number 9. Discussion and possible action on changing the
Oh.
park.
Oh,
Oh,
Full vote.
yeah, I think we only had a second.
There was a vote
We voted.
originally.
Oh, no,
there
This
was a
was just
vote.
direction. There was a
We
vote.
We voted
Ah.
already.
Yep. There just wasn't on the second direction, but we didn't, it wasn't a
We-
motion, it was
We
just
voted
a,
and then we had more discussion
Right.
after we voted.
yes, we're good to go.
So, it was unanimous. In favor. Okay, agenda item number 9. Discussion and possible action on changing the parking restrictions along Rolling Drive between Wallace and Gentry. Kevin,
So it just struck me that if I lived on Rollingwood Drive, I would rather have out cars parked across the street in front of the park than parked in front of my house. And right now, we prohibit parking adjacent to the park on Rollingwood Drive, but we allow it in front of the houses. And so I think, you know, I like the idea that we don't double stack parking on Rollingwood Drive. It's nice to keep it single stacked because it's not safe when it's double stacked. But I think it's safer to have the parking on the park side because people aren't having to cross the street. And you don't have, you know, kids coming out between cars into the street to cross the street. And I just would think if I was a resident, that's what I would prefer. But I wanted to see what others thought about it, and then my suggestion would be for an action item that we poll the residents who live over there, maybe even go door to door, it's so few, and maybe leave a note if they're not home, but,
there's 3 or 4 houses under construction, so
yeah.
there's nobody to, nobody to ask.
There you
so
go,
they
but
just-
I do think it'd be nice to get input from at least one
Yeah.
resident.
Yeah, I mean, I've polled a couple, and I'm not in favor of it.
Really?
And the other two, I mean, some of the things is like the park overflow can park today, so it doesn't really add any different. If there's overflow, they can park in front of the house. I think there's more hours of the day in the year where I have family or people have family that now you're telling them that they have to park on the other side and cross. That
Right.
there's no safety. I also think that most of the demand for parking is driven by baseball, and a lot of times, it happens a few times a year, maybe 10 weekends a year. And okay, on those Saturdays, it's busy in front of my house for 4 hours. Doesn't bother me, but I understand that there's kids having to cross the street then, but they're chaperoned. I mean, they come with guardian, a parent or somebody helps them get across the street safely.
Should.
I was thinking that if we were concerned about that, maybe we could have baseball ask them if they could hire traffic control to be out there during the days when they have that to help direct traffic.
I'm more concerned with what the residents want than, because I'm not really that concerned about it as public safety as the first issue.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, like you said, somebody's gonna be crossing the street either way. I just thought personally, as an aesthetic issue, it just made more sense to me if I was a homeowner, but I'm not a homeowner, so I'm not in your shoes, so that's why I wanted to hear what residents thought. So if you're telling me you don't think residents support
I'll
it,
just, personally speaking,
Yeah.
I think the aesthetic thing, I prefer it the way it is.
okay,
But I've talked to a couple other people. I won't say who they are, but
Sure.
I think you're welcome. You guys are welcome to go talk to them too.
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think your thought on it is enough for me.
Okay.
I mean, You live there and you,
So here's another alternative, because realistically, from a safety standpoint, people going to the park, it's safer for them to park next to the park than crossing the street, because parents should be watching, but if they have more than one kid, they don't always, and I have had to slam on brakes because kids get out of the car and run across the street. So, I've seen in Austin and a number of places where they have permit, like residential permit parking only. So that would be something that we could think about, that would allow parking for residents in front of their house, but not parking for park use in front of residents' house.
Honestly, I don't really want a permit sign in my yard. That's one thing. But the other option is just, why not just have overflow parking on game? Why couldn't you just say on game days when there's a lot of baseball, have it park on both sides of the road? on those days.
I think that's
Because
dangerous.
That's the most dangerous time to have
Yeah.
parking on
Yeah.
both sides, when you have people crossing both directions and you can't see.
I think that's right. I do think having that single stacked is terrible, because you're meeting somebody, if the whole block is parked up and you meet opposite traffic, it's like, I don't think you can really even pass each other
Mm-hmm.
necessarily.
I
And
think
then also-
I think Rollingwood Drive is wide enough to
Is it?
have, right, because that's the
Oh.
widest road in town. So
Oh,
I don't think
okay.
there's a problem with,
Right.
it's
If they
just
get
that the
right up to the
it's just the
curb.
visibility. Because then you have kids coming through between parked cars on the side of the park to get across the street to their cars, and you can't see them coming.
Well, if Alec doesn't want us to change it, I don't want to push a change. That's kind of where I'm at, because to me, you live there, so. I respect your opinion first and foremost.
Okay. Well, I mean, I appreciate that, but I mean, if you guys want to go talk to other residents and see how they feel, that's fine too.
You tell us if they chew you out for saying all that. They come back and say, "What are you doing? We want to move the parking." You let us know.
The Public Works guys did just freshly paint
It looks
yellow
great.
on the park side of the street.
We don't want to waste that paint.
I would hate for them to have to take that off after all
Well,
the work they've already done.
That was just my opinion. I thought I'd bring it up, and I understand that, if that's not what you want, I don't want to push it. So I will suggest that we just move on from that item to the next item.
All right, thank you for bringing it up. It's worth talking about, because that is a potential safety hazard with people crossing the street right there, so.
Yeah.
All right, agenda item number 10, discussion and possible action to authorize a project to rehabilitate the soil and grass on fields 3, 4, and 5 with private contributions.
Oh, and we have pictures. So this is a project that Phil McDuffie and I have worked on, and what started the conversation was this big bare spot out in fields 3, 4, and 5, and also when we were looking at rehabilitating the fields, let me just back up. We started a fertilizer and pre-emergent weed program in January and started irrigating the fields more deliberately and regularly in January. And the second fertilizer application was made yesterday and the day before. And today. And when we started looking at the fields, we figured that fields 1 and 2 actually had pretty good grass, but 3, 4, and 5, we didn't find much grass. But we had a bunch of different consultants out. We've met with the guys from Site 1, which is John Deere. They sent out a soil scientist. They looked at it, gave us a test. They gave us the fertilizer recommendation program. Then we've met, of course, with Izzy and the crew, and we've got Carlos and Fidel, who know what they're doing on grass, got their input from the maintenance department here in Rollingwood. And then we met with a guy named Sean Kincaid from KMI Sports, who is the contractor who's doing the work for Western Hills Little League on fields 1 and 2, where he rehabilitated the dirt and is planning to put new sod in the infield on field 1 sometime this spring or fall. We met with him. He's a good guy and a smart guy, and we got his input. And then we met. I know Blake Whittlesey, Whittlesey Landscapes, because I'm doing a development deal with him in Liberty Hill, and paving a road together. And so I've gotten to know him, and I asked him to donate materials, which he said he would do at cost. But then, even more importantly, he sent out his best guy who knows fields, who was a college baseball coach for 20 years. He's a smart guy, a nice guy. And he met with Phil and I and gave us some advice and recommendations. And the bottom line is, what he advised is that what we do is we should aerate all the fields, which I understand from our staff that we do have an aerator. It's not a plug extractor aerator, but it is an aerator on a drum. And it might be sufficient, especially since it's free. And then we should top dress all the fields with pure organic matter of 1/4 inch thick, which Whittlesey would supply to us. We'll have to pay some cost on that, but he'll give us a discount. And then we should bring in about 30 yards of sandy loam or 50-50 sandy loam organic mulch mix to raise that area up right there inside the gate, because that's a low spot. And what one of the consultants noticed and explained to us is that that field is supposed to be draining towards us as we look at that picture. But what's happened is a lot of that dirt that's been sort of washed out, blown out, kicked out of the bare spot has built up a berm or a lip under the fence there, and is preventing water from going out. So water sits in that spot, and what that does over time is it tends to compact the soil, kill the grass, and turn the soil more into clay and remove the organics up from it, which is why it's bare. And so he said if we will take a short section of fence down, cut that lip out of that grass strip, that's just west of the walking trail, cut it down, fix it to where it'll drain out properly, build that up inside the fence on that small area, which is probably only about 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, build it up with, maybe 30 yards, which is one truckload of that sandy loam mix, and then hydromulch that area. But what they suggested was, I think, a real smart idea, is that we cut another gate in. Let's go to another picture. Let's see, what are we looking at? Cut another gate in right there. I think that's the right one.
No, that's the right one.
That's the right one. So cut another gate in. Whoops. That's there you go. So cut another gate in there, right in the, say, right behind the backstop, and close the gate that's getting all the wear and tear in the previous photo. You can go back to the previous photo and close it. We'd do this work at the end of baseball in June and July. We'd close this gate to let that area, we'd build that up with a little dirt, hydromulch it, and then keep that gate closed until the fall. Make people use the other gate to give that area some relief. And if we do that whole project with the dirt, the hydromulch, the lip cutting, they call it, of cutting down that lip that's operating as a berm or a dam, and the fence work and such, we have enough private contributions to do all of that, including, aerating and putting organics on all the fields, not just 3, 4, and 5, but 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And a 1/4 inch of that organic mulch would really help retain moisture, reduce our watering costs, reduce weeds, improve the health of the soil. So we've got enough private donations. I asked some folks for donations, and I got 2 $5,000 donations and a $2,500 donation already committed. Been working with Chad Smith at Western Hills Little League. They're going to they support the project, and they're going to contribute to the project. I'm going to contribute to the project personally, but it'd be private funds, and we would just get them to pay. I think we'd get KMI Sports to run the whole thing, and just get the donors to pay KMI directly.
Does that not need to come through the city? Donations, I mean, they're tax deductible, right, if they make a donation to the city?
Yeah.
And then the city pays for that?
Yeah, we might do that to make it deductible, or go through Western Hills Little League would administer it if we wanted them to do it. Either way.
Boston Parks Foundation going to us or something?
If we did it, well, it's workable. How it's structured is something we can
Yeah,
do.
we'll figure it out, but it'll either be through the city or through Western Hills Little League, which is also a nonprofit 501c3. And then we'll give a full, I'll give a full accounting back to council about what donations were received, where they went, and what the expenses were with receipts for the expenses.
I just think since it's city property, it seems more appropriate to me to have it go through the city's.
So long as we have
Works.
control, that would be the only thing I would
Right.
be concerned about. So
Mhm.
as far as where the funding goes and who handles it, so long as we have control over who handles it, I mean, it makes no difference to me. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever works for this council, we can make the structure work.
And it doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to direct the donations to the city and have the city pay the contractor or the material suppliers. My only concern about doing it that way was whether that would trigger any sort of bidding requirements or anything, but
If it's over 50,000, it would definitely trigger bidding requirements.
Well, it won't be over
It's
50.
not gonna be over.
It's gonna be about
Then
30,000.
it won't trigger any bidding
Okay.
requirements.
And I
That
think,
was my only concern, is I just thought that it's gonna make it a pain.
Yeah, no bidding requirements under 50.
Perfect.
and since it's, city property, I think we'd want the contract to run with the city, and so that the warranties on anything would also run with the city.
Not gonna be any
Maybe minor,
warranties.
but I
Yeah.
think it would be good to have that.
I'm sure that's how it would be. The contractor would be with the city because he's gonna wanna get paid by the city. And I'll work with you on that when we get to that point. We're talking about doing all this work in June, and it might be a couple of different contracts, because I don't know who put that fence in, but we might get same fence contractor to come out.
It was
and put in-
Viking.
Get them to come in and put in the new gate. When it's time to temporarily remove the old fence, do the dirt work, and then have them reinstall the fence, I think it'd be better. So that will be a separate contract.
Okay.
We won't run that through KMI, but KMI will do all the spreading of the dirt. And then as far as the aeration, we may do that in-house with city maintenance department. And then might be a little bit of sprinkler work, but that's just ongoing sprinkler maintenance.
Sure.
So there are some details to be worked out, but as far as the fencing goes, I already have, I would recommend we use the same company again. They were great, and we have a continuing relationship with them, and so
Perfect.
it's just better to not get a new group. We went through quite a lot getting the fence done the first time, and went through a very extensive vetting process, and we got a great group to do it, so.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
From an insurance standpoint, having contractors working in the park, would that not make more sense to have the contract with the city and have the city manage that, so that, from a liability standpoint?
Purely a policy decision. I mean, if
We don't have liability. We have immunity.
yeah. Well, I mean, if something happened as a result of some negligence as a result of a machine operation, we could have some liability if we directed it or something, but, we would have an agreement with whoever if it went through the association, we would have an agreement with them, as to what our expectations are, and they would have that, but I don't have any problem with the city doing it. I think it's a good idea if the city does it. I think it works fine if the city does it, but whatever the structure y'all want, I can make work.
And these guys both have insurance, KMI and Viking Fence, so it's not. But I think it should go through the city. I think that, is, my only concern about that was the bidding requirements, and since that's not applicable,
Nope.
I would prefer it to go through the city.
It's easier to manage that way.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, do we have a motion to approve this project?
I think that's my job.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve
that-
it. Is it my,
what
do
I
I
would
move it, or do we have to get somebody else to move
No,
it?
you can make the motion.
Okay.
I would move that we approve the concept, and that we ask that the contracts associated with this and the financial arrangements be brought back for council approval when those are on paper.
I think that's fine.
Is that a second?
Second. Oh,
Uh,
sorry. That was probably a second. Sorry. I mean,
Any further discussion?
yes, the reason I seconded that is I do think that there's nothing controversial here. I think that it would be nice, though, to have parks, I don't know, there hadn't been a park commission meeting in a couple of months, it seems, or maybe, seems like maybe they had one last month, I don't know. But it would be good for them, like, there's one in April, like, I think coming up, just put this on the agenda, say this is what we're doing.
And I did go to the last park commission meeting and told them what we were doing, and
Okay.
nobody had a problem with it, but
Okay.
I'm not sure if it was on the agenda or not, but I told them about it, and we talked about it, but, it's, a good idea to have it on their agenda. Cause we have lots of time on this project, cause we're not looking at doing it until June, July.
Yeah, so I think it could come back and we could vote on it
Yeah, it's
in
fine.
April, or April.
Yeah.
It's fine.
And it would be good for them to know what's going on in the park.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do, because I told them, but I think to put it on a formal agenda is a good idea.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
If there's
Any
still none,
opposed say
aye.
nay. Motion passes. Okay. Going to agenda item number 11, discussion on possible future projects for park improvements with funds from RCDC, including walking trail and parking lot improvements.
Okay, so this is my item again. And all I'm proposing that we do at this time is have a discussion amongst the council to see whether council has any interest in the idea of trying to get RCDC funds available to be spent on the park. And my understanding, and as far as what we spend that on, you know, what I'm proposing that we discuss spending it on is trail improvements, rebuilding some of the trail around the park, and then perhaps some kind of parking lot improvements, but very broadly and without getting into any substance of what those might necessarily be at this point. I think that if, I know that RCDC, Phil and I are liaisons to RCDC. I know RCDC can, by statute, spend money for capital improvements in the park. I've looked at the statute. And I've been to an RCDC meeting where they were talking about how they don't really have any projects that they can spend any money on. And so I thought this would be a good project for them. They've got about $400,000, which could go a long way towards parking lot and trail improvements. And if, what I don't know is the process for RCDC or council initiating that sort of an expenditure, whether that has to come from RCDC or whether we can initiate it or who has to approve it procedurally, but I'm sure Charlie can tell us.
Y'all can take that initiative to RCDC.
Okay, and then they have to vote and approve it too?
Yes.
And then we have to, okay. So my question is to just see whether this council wants to approach RCDC to see if in general they have any interest in spending some of their money on walking trail or parking improvements. If the answer from them, from this council is yes, and the answer from the RCDC and the Park Commission is yes, then I think the next step would be to proceed with some planning and design options and cost estimates for those two projects. Explore other funding sources and options such as grants, and get public input, community input from about the proposed project and alternative options for things like parking particularly. I don't think the running trail would be too complicated or controversial, but when we start messing with parking lots at the park, and it could run into the idea, you know, that's in the park master plan now of taking that north parking area north of fields 3, 4, and 5, getting rid of it, turning it into green space, repurposing it, or including it in the multi-purpose space that is now occupied by 3, 4, and 5, and even potentially creating a dog park that might rob some space from 3, 4, and 5 if there was a grand compromise to be had with baseball and the dog lovers and the dog haters. But all that would come far down the road through a process where we get a lot of community input and present options. Right now, the only question is, generally, does this council have any interest in going to RCDC and seeing if they have any interest in spending some of their money on the park, on the trail or parking improvements or anything else, although those are the only two I thought of. That's it.
Seems to me we need to have a project that we want, and then we take the project to them because they have to have a project to approve.
Well, we don't have a project until we get a lot of community input about a potential project of parking, and that would involve coming up with a bunch of various alternatives and options for the community to give input on, and then we would settle on that project through that process and then take it to them for final approval. This is not asking or not proposing that we ask RCDC to approve a project. That's not where we are in this process. I'm only asking whether this council wants to approach RCDC to measure their interest in developing potential projects related to parking or trail improvements that they might vote to support later.
Kind of thought that was their job.
Well, I think it's our job too. I think leadership can come from anywhere.
No,
and
but I mean, the idea that that's what RCDC pays for. That's,
What-
it's already
What's their
Park-
job?
park improvements. That's one of the big things that we have used RCDC money for in the past.
Right, but there's been pushback from that, on that from time to time, but I do think it wouldn't take, what Kevin's asking is, does this council support us approaching RCDC to see if they haven't had to, and as far as putting together projects, I know it's been talked about when I was the chair of the park commission, and they were doing monthly park walkthroughs, you know, there's parts of the granite on the trail that's washing out and that type of thing. And there are ways to amend that by putting a binder in. It all stays the decomposed granite, so there's not differences of surfaces, but it keeps it from washing out. Those things are not cheap. So as far as putting together a project, just for instance, to take care of the trail, I think my feeling is it would be easy to take that back to the park commission, get their support. If RCDC has the appetite to help pay for that or pay for that, then take that. But what Kevin's asking is, does this council have appetite for us to approach RCDC with those type of projects? So I think where that's going.
And we are the liaisons to RCDC,
Right.
Phil and I are, so, you know, we want to know whether, we don't want to bring that up with them without getting some direction from council about whether council has any interest in talking about, you know, and getting in, coming up with options and getting public input for trail improvements and parking improvements.
I would say, from my perspective, 1, yes, 2, no, 3, yes. That's basically where I land.
Okay, so help me translate.
1, I'm saying the 3 projects here.
Oh, let me see, I gotta go back to my, I jumped over to the, okay.
Would
And
you
I
run
think-
through that again, Alex?
Sorry.
One
yes.
yes,
yes, I
2
mean-
no.
2,
3 yes.
remove parking. No, I'm not in favor of removing parking from the park. 3, rebuild parking lots north of Field 2. I don't know, is that east of Field 2? I don't know what that is. I'm thinking
There's
this.
something confusing in the wording on
I'm
that.
sorry, I must have typoed that somehow, or somehow it didn't get cut and paste. Rebuild the parking lots north of Field 2.
There's not a parking lot north of.
Yeah,
Field
that's
2,
supposed
so-
to be, say, south of
Oh,
Field
the
2.
south, well, okay, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
The one that's on the fronts on
On the
Rollingwood,
front, yeah.
and not the one that runs along between the park and the.
Well, I think
swimming
that
pool.
one needs to be reworked and needs to have, it'd be nice if it had curb and gutter because you could maintain grades there much more effectively for drainage, and also you could get rid of those, what I think are unsightly limestone boulders that are a menace to,
What is number 3? Is that what number 3 does also?
Mhm.
It's the parking between,
Rollingwood Drive.
3 is along that drive.
between Rollingwood Drive and the field,
And
and
the-
then
and the
between the
field.
field and the swimming pool?
yes.
Both of those?
Yes,
Okay.
those two.
Well, my concern
And
about,
then the other one that Alex said he did not support is that what I'll call the one north of Fields 3, 4, and 5.
Right. the concern I have a concern with 3, with respect to the area between the fields and the swimming pool, because that's a pretty large area. We have drainage problems already there. And whatever, this says with concrete curb and gutter. I would rather leave the option for improvement open, not
That's a good
require
point.
concrete,
Mhm.
so that we can also look at pervious.
It's a great,
Parking.
great idea.
And then the second thing is that whoever's gonna take a look at this project, also look at the, and I went back and looked at this, on the park webpage, there's a 2014 LNV drainage study that talks about the drainage from the park. And so, as this money's being spent in an area that's in a drainage, has a drainage problem, that be taken into account.
Great
Do what we
idea.
can with whatever funds are available to
Sure.
begin to resolve some of the drainage. And then really out of the box is the notion that, and I'm happy to show you videos I have of this, but the water that comes off of Western Hills Little League parking
Mhm.
and the new fields of the new tennis courts will come around and go down that drainway that ends up on Pleasant Cove.
Mhm.
In times past, it has flooded almost the house at 6 Pleasant Cove. There's a huge volume of water that comes off. If Western Hills is gonna be putting in a retention pond there because of the drainage requirements for the tennis courts, can we work out some kind of deal where the city could also benefit and maybe participate in whatever drainage retention is gonna go in there and solve some of that drainage problem? That's a big ask.
I think
But at
generally
least
drainage is a smart
it's-
thing to add to
what I was
this
gonna say is-
suggestion.
When Zach, what is Zach's last name?
Elkins,
I'm sorry?
Elkins.
Yes, with the Western Hills Little League, was talking with me about the variance they requested. That was one of the things they were gonna get their engineer to go look at again. And I think it's worth a conversation, a serious conversation.
I think drainage, that's a good idea to add drainage generally to this. There are some other drainage issues that we've looked at when we've met with various consultants, like those batting cages sit in the middle of a drainage draw and block them. There's a pipe that supposedly runs through them, but it's buried. And there's a good bit of drainage problems around the park, and I think we could look at park drainage generally as part of this project, because that's a good capital improvement
Right.
project related to park
What-
drainage that could be helpful.
What this L&V study suggests is that where we have a drainage pond off the end of the parking lot up here, but it doesn't have, it's just the pipe that gets it from that pond to the street has no retention feature.
Yeah.
The L&V study shows how you can use, what do you call that, where you put rocks inside of the,
French
Hog
drain.
Kind of
wire.
a French drain. of
well,
some-
there, but it's with hog wire and the rocks. What do they call
Gab-
it?
okay.
Gabion?
Gabions. You use gabions in a stepped way in those kind of retention ponds, and it will really retain the water long enough that it can get back into the ground.
Mm.
And so, those are some of the things I think are worth thinking about. That will really begin to, not just put a little makeup on it, but begin to solve these problems. So,
Okay, I think those are great ideas and great suggestions. You want me to reword this list of potential projects to talk to them about in light of that?
and I think involve parks. You've gotta involve parks.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that was part of the proposal.
Yeah.
The suggestion is that we approach RCDC and the Park Commission to talk about using RCDC money to improve the walking trail, to do drainage analysis and drainage improvement projects in the park. Parking lot improvements on the parking lot between Rollingwood Drive and Field 1. And parking lot improvements, I'm sorry?
Field two, yeah.
Field 2,
Field
sorry.
two.
All right, sorry, that's what I meant, sorry.
Yep.
I'm a little dyslexic here. And then parking lot improvements between Field 2 and the Western Hills Pool. Did I say that right? Okay.
2 and 3, 4, and 5. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever.
Between the fields and
And Western Hills.
Yeah.
I'll say the Fields and Western Hills.
Yeah.
Club, athletic club, is that what they call it?
Yes.
Okay, that's the proposal, that we just start gauging their interest on project, their money for those projects. Does that sound good?
Is that a motion?
It's a motion, I guess, unless there's any more discussion about it, or,
No, that's a motion, then,
okay.
okay, we'll just, we have a motion.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Now we have further discussion, and if you want,
Yeah, if I may.
go ahead.
Thank you. Shanti Jaykumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. So I was just talking to Kevin earlier today, and he had 3 major projects relating to the park. And in my mind, our park is the jewel of Rollingwood, and I am particularly invested in making sure that we do the right thing with whatever we do. I'm not suggesting you're not having good ideas here, but I dug through some of my records and wanted to bring up something with y'all which concerns some of this information about the moving the, what is that? What is the roadway that you want to take away from the end, attach it to the, the little parking area where people now park, which is.
That got rejected here, so that's
No,
not part of the
hold on,
proposal
hold on.
anymore.
I just
Okay.
want to give that thought.
Okay,
It's about safety. First of all, before I say anything, all of this I feel should go to the Park Commission because they spend a lot of time engaged in looking at every part of and I know y'all are going to do that. So it's a safety issue about if there were an emergency vehicle should be able to come all the way down and be able to turn around. Again, our police chief is here. Y'all, that's a safety issue from a transportation point of view. And even though that's not very prim and proper kind of a turnaround, and again, if there are 20 cars parked there during a game, and I don't know where, people have told me they have had to back up all the way back to get back on Rollingwood Drive. So there's a lot of issues about moving a parking area and eliminating the parking area. I feel concerned about that. And the other thing I wanted to tell y'all, and this comes from the legal document that was signed by the city when we bought the park from the Optimist Club, okay? So we talk about one aspect of that document, which is the intention that all of this area should be primarily allowed to be for children playing for kids' games. But the paragraph that goes before that, what it says is, and again, we have an attorney here who can do this, it's at one time they had envisioned a connection between Rollingwood Drive and Pleasant, because when we bought the 8.934 acres of land, they had retained 2 lots on where Mary McMahon then built a house, and there were 2 lots that the city had first option of first refusal, whatever that is called, option to first refusal. And the city didn't have the money, they didn't buy it, and then it was given out to the public. And these people bought the lot, it's almost 2 lots. So in the deed record here, there is a perpetual roadway. That's what it reads here. That this conveyance is made subject to the perpetual roadway easement reserved by deed recorded in volume 2986, page 1078. I have all those pages, but I didn't bring them. But deed records of Travis County, Texas, to the extent that the same retains in existence and is applicable to the property. So in other words, there is a perpetual roadway easement that runs along that fence that y'all are talking about between the, what do you call it, the swimming pool. And so it is a roadway. And there is a deed record here which says it always has to be a roadway. So if we want to put a milk and cookies there, for instance, I'm sorry, the roadway might be not allowing that, okay? This is just for your information, and I'm sure the city has all these records, but I just made these copies so y'all can have it ready
Thank
to go.
you.
Probably you find it easier than,
I don't know, sometimes I may give you one if you want to.
probably you know it
I don't
exists
know.
where other people don't know it exists, so.
Well, anyway, and then there is another piece of paper, I didn't have time to make copies, that shows the fields, and again, it doesn't show the roadway, but all the pages that I have, if somebody wants to make copies of it, they can. I brought it here. This is the, you know how a pin is there and then you go 20 feet this way and 20, whatever that is, right? This is from that page number that I'm telling y'all in the Travis County records, okay? So somebody can go and see whether the perpetual roadway is, I'll just give it to Ashley. and
Ashley
she
can take a look.
Y'all can take care of it, okay?
Ashley,
So these are my concerns about anytime y'all want to do something to the park. Please remember, it's the restrictive covenant is not just about, again, I'm not an attorney, I'm just speaking from my civilian intuitive interpretation of that statement, saying that probably there was an envisionment of a roadway that would connect because they had those other two properties there. Okay? So please go carefully with our park, tread, what do you call it? Tread easy.
Tread softly.
Yeah, hands off our park, keep our park apart. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional discussion?
I would just respond, thank you for bringing us that information, and we know how much you love the park.
My pleasure.
And I will definitely, as we go through this process, be talking to you, but there's gonna be lots and lots of public input and committee meetings and public meetings and who knows what else before we settle on anything. This is just the very beginning of just feeling out interest. And, we're moving ahead with the motion, if it passes, without looking at we're going to leave off that parking area that's north of the fields, that's in the back, that dead end area. We're not going to have that as even be part of the discussion, the way the motion's currently pending. I will tell you, though, as far as public safety goes, I personally believe that, as far as getting an ambulance back there, you could build a part of the hiking trail sufficiently for access for emergency vehicles without any difficulty. And that's commonly done where you don't want vehicles to go, you make it a walking trail that's accessible to emergency vehicles. And that's what I would envision if we ever did get rid of the back parking lot, is that walking trail would be up to standards to handle an ambulance. And personally, I believe that parking lot on the north side of those fields with its one way in and out is dangerous. And it's not up to standards. It doesn't meet, probably any code standards for parking lots at public facilities. We would never allow a private business to operate a parking lot like that. So I think the fact that we have such a poorly maintained and designed parking area, and it's so inefficient in a place where we have so little land in our park, it's so small, and to have such inefficient parking with a long one-way drive and a bunch of boulders that are used as curbs is bad. That's my opinion. That's why I suggested we look at changing that area too. But there's not support on council right now to do that, but there is support to look at, I think, hopefully we'll see if my motion passes, to look at some of these other parking areas. And the drainage, I thought, was a great suggestion from Councilmember Brown. And of course, I think the walking trail is not too controversial. So, but thank you very much. That was all I had.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Anything else? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes. Okay. Agenda item number 12, discussion and possible action on traffic code enforcement. This is mine, and it's very brief and non-specific, and I didn't provide any backup because I've been slammed at work and didn't have time to put that together. But I had a call from a resident who lives on Rollingwood Drive who was contemplating spending what amounts to $50,000 between construction and drainage studies and everything else, and maybe more than that if they had to put any drainage improvements in, to put in a circle drive on his property because they keep having near misses getting run into when they're trying to back out of their driveway. Because traffic on Rollingwood Drive is so fast, and it's kind of up a hill and around a curve right where their house is, so it's kind of a tricky spot. And that to me is crazy to have a resident spend that kind of money to be safe getting out of their garage or out of their driveway. And so I have noticed, just walking around the neighborhood, what seems like fast traffic, particularly construction-related traffic. And also, we have a proliferation of, I don't know what to call them, all kinds of wheeled motorized vehicles.
Pocket bikes.
But it's not the pocket bikes anymore. It's the e-bicycles and the scooters and the, I don't even what they like, hovercraft. I don't even, what are they? You know, they're just all kinds of. Well, you know what?
I actually know what you're talking about, so yeah, it was
I
well
don't
described.
even know what all they are, but there's and golf carts and all kinds of not traditional automobiles on our roads. And to me, the combination of kids on motorized vehicles and speeding pickup trucks is bound not to end well. And I would like us to do some education. I think all of us need a better understanding, and the residents, the parents need a better understanding of what is street legal, you know, what vehicles can be on the roads, and what the requirements are. It's like, are you supposed to be on the right side of the road or on the left side of the road, or where they go, you know, and better training for the kids on those vehicles, and better enforcement. If people are speeding, and I talked to the chief earlier, and she said they have been doing some of that studies, and it's like, because of the topography and the curves and everything else and rolling with it, sometimes it looks like people are going faster than they really are, and so maybe they're not really speeding, but it just seems like it is. But anyway, I just think that we need to have a discussion about what we can, and if you have any comments, Chief, I would love to hear that also. But I just want to make sure that we are looking at all of our options and making sure that we're keeping everybody as safe as we can.
Correct, and I don't know if y'all noticed, but in the past couple of weeks, we deployed a speed trailer. And that way we can create a mobile and put it around the city so that we can grab data from the, you know, those streets. What we did discuss earlier is we are thinking about maybe creating a newsletter that includes our ordinances along with state statute regarding the e-bikes, because there are different classes on who can ride what class of e-bike, requiring helmets, and we can discuss on what side of the street that they need to be on. And I think it's a good time before we get into summertime to go ahead and put that into the water bills. And as always, I mean, we definitely compared, I looked at our 2021 racial profiling, which captures all of our traffic contact, versus our 2022, it's up 66%. So, I mean, the traffic contacts are being made, but, I mean, unfortunately, we have a lot of traffic that is starting to as we know, use Rollingwood as a through street. But I think that's where, I mean, we're trying to implement other things, like I said, like the speed trailer to kind of capture that attention of the motorists to get them to kind of slow down in those areas.
I have a question.
Mhm.
How do you manage where our patrols spend their time? In other words, I haven't had any education on how much time is spent actually traffic enforcement versus other tasks, and kind of what's the overall game plan in terms of traffic enforcement versus traffic and speeding enforcement versus other duties.
Right, so they're supposed to, I mean, traffic enforcement, I mean, you have your running radar at all times. I mean, if somebody is speeding while you're doing your regular patrols, you'll be able to capture those. We do have our, areas that we have a little bit are problematic, which are Timberline and Hatley and things, where they are given instruction to sit and monitor, and like our stop signs and what, so they actually dedicate time to those, and we do document those, like on our contact report that they did, what streets that they did sit on that during their shift. So that way we can also monitor, okay, we have been sitting on Timberline, for this amount of time, and we haven't really, captured anything from there. And then that way, it kind of backs up that, do we have a problem in that area, or do we not have a problem in
Where
this
do you
area?
spend your
Correct.
time?
But we basically, give them different traffic enforcement areas based on complaints,
Okay.
as well. I mean, or just, it doesn't even have to be a complaint, just a concern. I mean, if somebody calls me and says, can you do some traffic enforcement in this area, we have no issue on getting them to sit in that area and see what's going on.
Okay.
I'd like to address this too. One of the things that you mentioned was the non-traditional vehicles, and I am a personal injury lawyer, and have handled a lot of cases over the years involving non-traditional vehicles, including golf carts. I mentioned I've built a subdivision that, much like Rollingwood out in West Texas in Lubbock, and out there we had a problem with kids riding golf carts, and I wrote 2 letters to the residents when I was controlling the homeowners association, reminding them not to do that, and still the tennis coach's kid rolled a vehicle and suffered a catastrophic brain injury and was in a vegetative state for 10 years until he died of COVID last year. And that was after I had written letters to the residents, which was very upsetting to me. I don't know that they were a resident when I wrote the letters, but it's just frustrating to see.
Right.
And then, I've handled a half a dozen other cases where kids who are not licensed have rolled those sorts of vehicles and suffered crushing chest injuries or head injuries or amputations. And it drives me crazy when I see these golf carts being driven in the community by someone who's not a licensed driver, because that's illegal, and it happens out here all the time. And I can tell by looking at the kids that they're not old enough to be a licensed driver, but they're driving. And when adults have unbelted children in those vehicles, that also is a worse crime, because the adult is participating in subjecting their child to danger, which could even result in prosecution to the adult for endangering a child if there's a subsequent injury, and I don't think people are aware of that. And then even today on Hatley Drive, I saw 2 kids who were about 12 years old riding motorcycles, which are like little 50cc or smaller bikes. Maybe they're pocket bikes. I know 50 cc's is the state law limit on being street legal, and they might have not been street legal, but I don't care if they were street legal. Those kids were 12 years old. They're not legal riding any motorcycle, a pocket bike or a street legal bike.
Right.
And they were riding around wearing helmets, running stop signs, chasing each other up and down Hatley Drive. Real cute, but very dangerous and very illegal. So those are my concerns that I've seen about enforcement issues.
Okay. And we can definitely pass that on to patrol as well to keep an
I
eye.
mean, if you, and you see it at a lot of times at, kids riding on these golf carts in the summer in the evening with it hanging off the back or sitting on dad's lap or something. It's just not
And
right.
we have done traffic enforcement on the golf carts when we do see somebody who does appear to be younger than the license
Okay,
age, and also for unbelted children.
great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I just think that I like your idea of putting something out in the, in the, the water bill
Right.
or something like that. I think the part of the issue is that a lot of people, probably most people, just don't know what the law is. You know, what is legal versus not, and just giving, some education to people on, what can and cannot
Right.
be done legally would be helpful.
And we did see that with the pocket bikes. I mean, you know how it is. I mean, some things become fads, and as a parent, you want to provide your child with the coolest thing, on the market at the time. But I think if we get ahead of summertime and provide that education that way, some parents can make that call to their children.
I think that would be great. All right.
I have one more comment. It's not on the, it's about the speed, the signs that you put up. Is there any way we can get like a report at some point, like down the line, of like, hey, this is the data we
Definitely.
collected, this is how many?
Pull the data this week.
Okay.
After because it's been sitting there for, a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can definitely provide those reports to you, so that way you can see, kind of what's going on.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
It seemed to glitch in some areas, cause I was like, okay, there's no way there's 0 vehicles at 9 a.m.
Okay.
So I think we've gotta make some adjustments.
Got
I
it.
mean, we just deployed it and just kinda got it up and running, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Because I've always thought
definitely.
like, yeah, it seems like a car speeding, but then again, I'm sitting here and I don't really know. Maybe that's what 25 miles an hour is, or 30 is. And that's why it'd be really interesting to just see what the data
Of course.
shows if you had,
Yeah, and what we can do is, we can actually put it probably with our chief's report too, that way you can kind of see,
yeah, that'd be great.
and pull the data on those.
Awesome.
No problem.
That'd be great.
And are we gonna move that around to the
Yes,
other? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so, we're addressing we had a concern with that area right now, so that's what we're kind of
Sure.
focusing on that area, but that's where we created, so that was actually meant to be a permanent sign that was never deployed, so we kind of created a speed trailer, that way we could use it to move it around the city and collect data,
That's a good idea.
so,
All right.
any questions?
Yeah, I don't think that we need a motion on anything. I just wanted to have the discussion and then hopefully get some better education so
Yes.
that we
Yes, we'll get that,
keep everybody safe. So,
no problem.
all right, thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Can I say one thing before this is over?
Yes.
And it's only because you're talking about traffic.
So introduce yourself.
I'm wondering,
Dave?
Dave Bench, 1 Randolph. I know that whenever you apply for a building permit.
Permit.
Thank you. Permit. When you apply for a building permit, there's a list of rules that you go through, and one of them is to limit the traffic that is coming up Edge Grove. And as it is large trucks, I think over 2 ton, are not permitted to go up Edge Grove. But we're kind of on the corner, and we see how much traffic, construction traffic, comes up Edge Grove, and we wonder, is it anything being enforced on that? Whenever you come off of Bee Caves, there's actually a sign there, and it says no through trucks. Come to Bee Caves up at Edge Grove, about 100 feet into Edge Grove, you see there's a no through traffic there. And I'm not aware that any construction traffic of any kind pays any attention to that at all. There's concrete trucks that come through there. There's all manner of everything being hauled that can be hauled. My guess was that this thing was put in place because of the fragility of the Edge Grove Bridge there. I doubt it can take that much weight. you know, over and over and over again, and it's probably fallen apart as a result. I'm just wondering, is that something that our police department actually patrols? Is that a thing that somebody
Yes.
looks at?
So we do look at it, and it's actually, this week, I actually forwarded the map and the ordinance to Nikki, so that way we can push it again out to builders.
Cool.
And that way, so yes, so that is also on our radar as well.
Okay.
And so we are also providing the education, so that way we can curb that as well. And
Thanks so
so-
much. Thanks so much. I would be remiss if I didn't get up here at least
Of
once.
course.
You'll have more opportunities.
Okay, that's it for number 12. And agenda item number 13, discussion on an ordinance ratifying certain setbacks which have been approved by the approval of plats. Ashley.
This was at the direction of council last month for the city attorney to draft an ordinance that would provide that any setback shown on plats previously approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission be considered the legal setbacks for those properties. What you have before you is a draft ordinance drafted by our city attorney. This ordinance would have to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission and then back to City Council through the public hearing process before approved, which is why it is just posted for discussion this evening to get you guys' thoughts on what's being proposed here.
And I have a question on it, if I may.
Okay.
Because I guess it was my motion last time, and then we've had a couple of conversations about it since then, because I really want to hear, I guess, from Charlie about it, because I know there was a concern, well, initially there was a concern expressed by some council members about making this so broad and that we don't really know how many houses are affected, and of course it's a legitimate concern. And so one of the things we were going to try to do administratively was look into see how many houses would be affected, but that was impractical. And so then we had a conversation or a suggestion that perhaps I suggested perhaps we limit it to a certain time period, like some approvals from them in the last 2 years, or something that actually never was on the table last time, which is limiting it to these 2 addresses that are at issue. And I don't know if there's a problem with limiting it to the 2 addresses. I think somebody mentioned something about spot zoning. But you want to, and I guess my feeling about this is that, you know, I mean, this came up because this came up at a P&Z meeting, you know, with these permit P&Z variances, plat variances. And, you know, we didn't hear anything from city attorney that was there about whether they could do that. They were asked, but they wasn't really answered. And then, you know, this issue came up about, well, was the mayor's action particularly lawful or not? And there was some question about technically whether it is or isn't. And so we're just trying to fix this and come up with a way to put to rest any question about the validity of these 2 building permits and their setbacks, so that they don't have any future concerns with it. Can you give us a suggestion, Charlie, about how we can do that without creating something that's so broad and has unintended consequences, and particularly because the language of this draft says that the plats are ratified for, I think it said for, that properly approved plats are hereby ratified, but the whole question was whether those plats were properly approved with setback variances, and so it doesn't seem to do what we want it to do anyway, and so.
Well, then, you know, I guess we're sort of the dog chasing the tail with that, you know, with that situation, because, I mean, we can either say plats or properly approved plats, but if we say, well, implicit in plats is that they were properly approved, either administratively or through the P&Z process, right?
Okay.
And so whether we say plats are properly approved, I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I think that the only way to do it the way that was brought up is the way that I've drafted it. And the reason for that is because this is unlike the other situation, in that this is a zoning regulation. This is a zoning issue. The other was not a zoning issue. It was,
The other being,
the one lot with the cutback and into
Cut
the
slope.
the cut slope into the side
Retaining
yard.
wall.
That was not a zoning issue, so I didn't have any real concerns about how that was handled. But the zoning statute says that within each district, the governing body, here, let me find the right zoning regulations must be uniform for each class or kind of building in the district. So if we just say, and the issue with Rollingwood is you have one residential zoning district. So all of your regulations need to be uniform with respect to class and building. And so if we just say we're only approving those, I can easily argue that setback set on plats is a class of building that was approved. And so I'm comfortable that that's a class, that so long as it's all of them. But if we say only those that are approved in the last 3 years, I have a little more difficult time defending that from the way the statute reads, which is your regulations have to be uniform between each class of building and regulation. And if we had 4 different zoning districts and we only applied this to one of them, that would be one way to limit it. But we have one zoning district for the entire city.
Okay. And I guess I'd like to hear from Ashley or the building officials or anybody else who has any concern that this is overly broad and we don't really know. I mean, what are the chances that it's going to create a problem being this broad for all previously approved? I know we were trying to talk about looking into that to understand the extent of that issue, and it wasn't feasible. Could you address that?
I think it would have to be handled on a case-by-case basis as a plat was presented. So we don't actually have all plats here. The county is the authority on plats. I suppose they're probably in minute documents or agenda packets from previous years, but depending on how they were approved and when, we may not have those documents here. And so it would be a matter of, if someone were to bring a plat that had setbacks on it that, were or were not, if we determined that they weren't with, in accordance with the zoning code, we would have to go back and research that particular plat and how it was approved and that it was approved properly, or I suppose if it's approved.
Right. You would have to determine whether or not that setback was approved pursuant to a plat. I really don't see this any different than in non-conforming uses. Anytime you have an existing non-conforming use that's in your community, you don't know that those exist oftentimes because they happened years and years and years ago until it comes forward for some issue. They come in and ask for a building permit to expand their back patio or add an accessory building, and you go, well, you can't do that, because something got destroyed. And they say, well, this is an existing non-conforming use that was authorized prior to the adoption of the code. That necessitates staff having to do the research to determine, was it indeed an existing non-conforming use? And if it was, then okay, yeah, you can, as long as it's not more than 50% destroyed, you can rebuild it or do whatever you want.
Well,
So I don't see any different than that.
I
But
understand.
it still require work if something were to come forward.
What if it was handled as a settlement of a potential claim?
Well, we couldn't do that for all of them. They don't all.
No, not all of them. I'm just talking about for the Rollisons and potentially
Sure.
Shapiro.
Yeah.
Be-
We can negotiate a
Mayor Pro
settlement.
Tem, I have a suggestion.
Go ahead.
I have thought about this also since our last meeting, and I have a proposal I would like to suggest. It's along the lines of a compromise and settlement type proposal, but I think we need advice of council on that. We could do it one of two ways, either go into executive session or discuss it generically as a process and get advice of council publicly. I'm not sure which way might go about that,
It's up
but
to y'all.
I'm not concerned about attorney-client privilege on this issue, so I would suggest we just discuss
Okay.
it publicly.
And I have written this out and made a copy, but I'll pass this around and I will, when it comes to Ashley, I think I've made 10 or 12 copies. Instead of an ordinance, I'll wait till this gets around and give you the proposal. Instead of an ordinance, I would suggest, and if you could give one to Ms. Rollison, please.
Yes, we're gonna make a few more copies as well.
Okay. Instead of a proposed ordinance, what if we did a resolution that would delegate to the city administrator authority to negotiate a proposed compromise and settlement agreement between the city and certain building permit applicants, I'll get to that, by which the city would ratify the permit as a part of the settlement, and the permittee would release the city from any claims, and that any proposed compromise and settlement agreement would be brought to the council for approval. We could define the conditions on which this process would be available. The two I have suggested would be that the permit involves a corner lot where plat approval was given for a 20-foot setback on that corner lot prior to February 16, 2022. That's the date where we received advice of council that approval of a plat does not approve the setback line shown on that plat. And hopefully resolve that issue. And then the second condition would be where the applicant has shown significant reliance on acts of the city such that an estoppel claim might be asserted. So that it would be a true compromise and settlement in advance of litigation. The city would get the assurance that no subsequent claim would be filed, and the permittee would get, in effect, a recordable document that would be subject to recording if necessary, showing that the city had ratified the setbacks shown in the building permit. And that if the council decides to approve this methodology, then I would propose that the council authorize the mayor to enter into such an agreement with the Rollisons for the 304 Vale property. The reason for addressing that tonight is the fact circumstances that are associated with the approval of that permit. That being that the building permit application was filed before the February 16 clarification. Planning and zoning approved the plat before the February 16 clarification. Between February 16 and June, the permittee was not notified that they needed to go to the Board of Adjustment, according to Ms. Rollison's statements to me, and so that we have a true reliance claim there. And what this methodology would do would say any permittee that wants this kind of clarification can address it with the city administrator. The city administrator can negotiate whether or not the city staff would recommend approval or not, and then bring it to the council, and the council could approve or not on individual basis. And it seems to me what we don't have with the ordinance, we don't have, we're approving building permit, we're approving plats on setbacks as the way setbacks per plat, which is what we've tried to get away from. And we don't have assurance that there won't be a claim filed for delay damages or any other consequence to the city under that process. And so I would assume that we have only a handful of these. and that what, this would be administratively, efficient way to handle those permittees that felt they need some kind of ratification of their building permit. And it leaves the building, it keeps it associated with the building permit, and we have a track where when the issue comes up, in the event of redevelopment or a remodel or whatever, we know what the city did and what they approved for what plat, for what tracks. So that would be, if that would meet with, if the city attorney can give us the okay, that would be an acceptable process, that's what I would like to propose.
All right, may I respond to that? It's just, so I do see problems with the previously proposed solution that I'm offered and which council voted to pass, and I'm open to amending that. And I do think that a settlement agreement is a smart way to go to do it, to limit the solution to the affected properties and not create unintended consequences. And so I'm open to that. I think the process that you laid out is overly complicated, and I would suggest instead that we authorize the city administrator to just make a settlement agreement with the two affected properties that we know of, with the Rollisons on Vale and on Buck Shapiro's property, to propose and offer an agreement that would ratify the building permit, and which would then also release the city from any claims, and that it'd be a simple compromise settlement agreement that ratifies the building permit for the Rollisons and the Shapiros, and we get a release of any potential claims over the permitting process, and leave it at that, rather than creating a new administrative process that might or might not apply to like stuff that was between February 16th and June, whatever. So that would be my proposed amendment to what we've done, which takes your idea, but just sort of simplifies it and strips it down to those two
And
properties.
limits it to just those two properties.
Mhm.
Here's my concern with the Shapiro property. If we use February 16 as the date we clarified that plat approval does not approve setbacks. The Shapiro building application was not filed until May, after that February clarification. I'm not ruling out that the Shapiros can show some kind of reliance or other estoppel concerns. But when I look at the permit file, everything in that file happened after. They don't have P&Z approval of a plat in that process. They had the city administrator sign off on a plat as to subdivision requirements. They didn't file a building permit until May, after the February situation, after the February clarification, and they were notified in the normal course of that building permit application in the first zoning review that the setbacks didn't meet the code. So there wasn't the absence of notice of that for any period of time. So if they can show it, I'd be happy to consider it, but I have not seen a reliance argument, and they have not started construction on that property.
Okay, so, my turn.
That's why I did not include it.
Right. So I am not a lawyer, but I have another suggestion that I would like Charlie's input on whether or not it would work. To me, the simplest way to address this, to me, would be for the Rollisons to go in front of the Board of Adjustments and ask for a variance. And I think you could demonstrate a hardship because you have relied on this approval and you have started construction. And so that would give a variance for that one particular property that has already started construction based on city action. That would protect that one. If the Shapiros wanted to take theirs to the Board of Adjustment, they could do that too. They have not started construction, so they wouldn't have the same type of hardship. And if anybody else has an issue that they wanted, that they had relied on the plat approvals and have already constructed a house, if they are concerned about that, they could do the same thing and go to the Board of Adjustment and get a variance approved because they relied on that and they have already built a house. And so that to me would be a hardship to require them to comply with that. And that way we are not creating any new procedures, we're not creating any new ordinances, we are giving a variance for the specific instance, and we don't have to.
Can
don't
I,
have to
can
do
I,
anything
res-
else.
can I respond to that to both
I
of
would like
y'all's?
to be recognized, Mayor Pro Tem.
Likewise.
Okay, Brooke, go ahead.
The, what the city doesn't get, if we ask the Rollisons to go through the Board of Adjustment, is a release of claims. And there are, in my review of the circumstances, there are concerns about how they were treated and the lack of notice that they got. And this, what I've proposed would resolve that. We don't have to create a process. We could authorize the mayor to negotiate a settlement agreement with them along the lines outlined here. That's the difference. And plus the concern of what time it would take and what would happen in their building process. Excuse me, I'm getting too dry. So that is the difference I see.
And may I be recognized,
Yes.
please? Okay, so
Excuse me.
here's my perspective on this at this point, after hearing what you guys have proposed. My perspective is that the city mishandled this whole building permit application process and the setback variance process, and has annoyed some residents and put them through unnecessary difficulties. The mayor, in good faith, tried to fix that by entering into writing a memo, taking some action, as he put it, to avoid threatened litigation, or maybe, which was purportedly a settlement agreement. And he did that back in August. That wasn't a problem until there's a question about whether the mayor had the legal authority to do that, which is a legitimate question. I understand that we have to do things according to law, and so I think it was a legitimate question to be raised for our purposes as a council and how we operate as a city. Do we want city officials issuing building permits by decree that aren't conforming with our statutes? To me, we need to solve this as quickly as possible with as little difficulty as possible for the two people who were the benefit of those mayor's memos, and we don't need to leave we don't need to undermine the mayor's action necessarily under that in trying to solve those problems, other than to say, please don't do that again. And then I think we should take action to make it legal. And to me, the easiest, quickest way to make it legal might be for us to simply vote to ratify those two memos issued by the mayor back on, what was it, August 8th of 2022. What if we just did that, Mr. Zach?
All of these are options, yes.
All right. Then I would make a motion that we ratify the August 8th memos pertaining to the Shapiro and Rollison houses and leave it at that, if that's acceptable to Ms. Rollison.
Okay. Well, that,
Wouldn't have
time
discussion
out.
on that.
First of all, that is not on the agenda, so we can't do that tonight because what we have on here is just discussion on ratifying on an ordinance, but not even action, because the ordinance has to go to P and Z. So we are not noticed for action on this item tonight.
Okay. I don't think a ratification would have to go to P and Z, but I understand the notice issue.
But yeah, we are not noticed to take action tonight, so we cannot ratify them.
I would like to respond to Mr. Glashan's proposal.
Okay?
I think it would not be a good idea to ratify the mayor's memos. because the mayor did not have authority to issue those memos. And so ratifying those memos, I think, would just compound the potentially problematic action. I think we have to do it either by a settlement agreement with these applicants. I don't see a way to, the council, as I read the statute, even we as a complete council can't take on the duty of the Board of Adjustment. We can settle a lawsuit, but we can't act as the Board of Adjustment. We can't act to grant a variance. And so when I approach it from that point of view, we have, I don't see the ordinance avenue working.
Okay.
And so I think we have to do it as a settlement
I think
agreement.
I would be okay with
And I
that.
think
I
that
just think
gives-
we should make it for both homeowners though, and just leave it at that.
Well, I see it, you know, we've got to have a reason for granting, in effect, we have to have a reason.
Well, one reason is the mayor issued them permits back in August, and I think that the fact that there's been mistake after mistake, or directed
If
the
I might,
staff to-
if
The
I,
mayor
if-
did not
if I
issue
might
the
address
permits.
that. I'm not sure the mayor had done a timeline on the Shapiro situation, or was fully informed. And so, I don't think we can, I think we have to do our job as a council and determine whether there are circumstances that equity calls us to observe in settling what would otherwise be an improper permit. I think we have to have good reason, good cause to do that. I'm not sure that, you know, and I would give the Shapiros full opportunity to present whatever they want to present in terms of what consequences flow from what happened.
or go to Board of
And we might reach
Adjustment.
the same result as the Rollisons. I just don't know I
I
haven't
understand.
found the facts in the permit file there, and they've initiated no conversations to discuss that.
So they would either need to come back to us with a request and lay out some facts, or go to Board of Adjustment and do it that way.
They
'Cause
could
it's-
do
they
it
could
either
still
way.
do.
Yes, they could come to the city administrator. The staff could take a look at the file, make a decision about whether they want to recommend that we approve the settlement, and we would do it in an orderly way.
I understand. I don't oppose that.
Okay.
Okay. Charlie?
Sorry, I was just having a discussion. Well, that, of course, it would necessitate us revoking the Shapiro building permit.
I'm
Well,
sorry, I couldn't hear
It would
you.
necessitate us revoking the Shapiro building permit
Why?
What would,
Be- because it's been issued.
what would,
Well, if you're
what is
saying,
the what you're talking
well,
about?
either the Shapiros can build under the existing building permit, or they can't. So if they begin building, if we don't give them notice that their building has been revoked, and they begin construction under good faith that they believe they have a legitimate building permit, we're gonna tell them, based on what I'm hearing, to stop construction because their building permit wasn't
Well-
properly issued, right? I mean, that's the only way I see how this process works out.
May I
Yeah, of course, yeah.
My understanding is that Mr. Shapiro is in the process of trying to sell that property, has not begun construction. We could issue a temporary stop work permit that would allow this to be brought back to the council and a decision made on the validity of the existing permit.
And if Mr. Shapiro chooses not to do so,
Well, then
because he believes he has a validly in effect building permit?
I think this is where we get into attorney-client privilege, and
Well, I mean, these
that
are all
would-
just issues we need to sort out.
Well, and if we need to do that in executive session, let's do it in
I'm
executive
opposed.
session.
I'm opposed to going to executive session on this at this time. But if you want to make a motion about it, I guess you could, but I think that the problem is that we issued building permits, and we need to clean it up. We've made a big enough mess out of this, and it's gone on too long, and we've handled it poorly, not just as a city officials, but I think as council and in dealing with our mayor on it. And we need to put a stop to it, and let's solve it, and let's just solve it for both properties now by entering into either ratifying the permits now or entering into a settlement agreement. And a ratification could have a provision that the mayor doesn't have authority to settle this lawsuits or threats of litigation, but he did, and we're gonna ratify it so that it's proper. And that's one way, or the other way would be to say, send, ask the city attorney to draft a proposed compromise settlement agreement that ratifies the permits in exchange for release of claims from both parties. But I think we have to deal with both of them. I think that we're just making a bigger mess and turning this into a more painful and unnecessary process by continuing to pick at this wound. And we need to just put an end to it as quickly and as simply and as thoroughly as possible. That's my opinion.
Okay, I have two questions. First one for Nikki. Issued building permit. If the property sells and construction has not started, is the building permit still valid?
I don't see why not, if they're staying in the same plans.
It's valid.
Okay.
Do they expire?
They do.
How long do they last?
Actually, our building permits don't expire anymore.
Well, we ought to have them expire.
But they do. 2 years. 2
Yeah, they
years.
do.
2 years.
Is it 2 years?
2
2 years.
Application.
They're 2 years. We have an ordinance that puts a 2-year expiration on permits.
Okay, so it expires in 2 years, but it does not expire with
And it's
change
a
of-
rolling, it's a rolling 2
Used to be
years.
6 months.
If he
There's
was
no
to,
action.
if he was to do something in movement towards putting that building permit into motion, then the 2 years starts
Restarts
at
the
the time. Restarts the clock.
Mm.
Yeah. Which is
Yeah,
very
that's
easy to do.
problematic, right. Okay, and so thank you. Second question's for Charlie. So what are our options?
In order of solutions, this is my preference. Adopt the ordinance that is applicable to all situations, because that's the cleanest. It's a regulatory change. It's a regulatory change that is uniform across all properties associated with this issue and is completely defensible. My second is the settlement and compromise actual document, assuming that the other parties are willing to enter into them, because they don't have to enter into them. But that's my second one, and I do believe, I agree with you, Councilmember Goshen, that both properties, because the building permits have been issued, is the cleanest and easiest way to handle that. I have no issue compromising a claim, even if we believe the claim doesn't have a good chance of success. Cities compromise claims that don't have good chances of success all the time in order just to avoid the litigation costs. And then my last one would be just ratifying the action. That's last on my order of if you were to ask me rank which ones your preference is, that's my rank.
Okay, the first one would require action by P and Z.
Yes, it would.
The second and third do not require
They do not.
P and Z action.
No, they do not.
Okay. I will say personally, I don't like the ordinance idea because we have no idea what we're approving. Because there's no time limit on that. We have no idea how far back this has gone, what we'd be approving. And if we say we're approving the plats that were done, that means somebody could come in, tear down what was there that was built under that approval from 30 years ago and build something 3 times as big, still relying on that setback because it was now approved.
That's a truth, yes, ma'am. And
And-
let me be clear, when I say my preference, I'm making a legal
I-
ranking,
no,
not a
I-
policy ranking.
Right, no, I understand that, I appreciate, and that's what I wanted to hear, but that is my concern, because we just have no idea what we're approving if we do that, and I cannot in good conscience vote in favor of that, so,
My-
that is my concern.
I have a short comment on that.
Okay,
And if we now have an ordinance that says that setbacks are approved per plats,
Right.
we have affected all of the neighbors of all of the plats, and we don't know what kind of setbacks are shown on those plats.
Right.
We do not know that the setbacks were correctly viewed at the time. We've had advice of council since 2019 that, this was back, Charlie, in planning and zoning, that setbacks, if they're put on a plat, they have to be correct. But we know that that has not happened in all cases. And so I think we're better off doing a settlement and compromise process
I'm okay with that, too.
than doing this ordinance for that reason.
okay. Kendra, you've been very patient. Go ahead.
Kendra Rollison, 301 Wallace. I was just gonna say that I am in support of the quickest solution, and as much as I love spending time with all of you, I would say that the settlement and compromise is probably, if under the existing agenda item, if it seems like it's permitted, that the process could be
We could get direction.
started.
We
yeah.
could get direction.
So that would be my number one choice.
Okay,
Great,
thank you.
Let's do that. And move on.
Yes.
Yes.
Can we make a motion then to direct the city attorney and city administration or mayor to
No.
what? Why not?
No
Because
action.
we're not posted for
No,
action.
Right, but
Take
you can
direction.
give us direction, and then we can
Right.
bring it back for
We-
further
we
action.
can't-
Ah,
We can't make a
okay.
motion. We
Yeah.
cannot
Alright.
vote on anything.
I get it.
We can
That's
talk
fine.
about it, and
Yeah.
they can do
Okay.
their thing, but
Well,
we
that's the
can't.
direction then.
Yes.
Yeah, we can get direction to bring back.
Okay.
Seems unanimous.
Yes.
I think there's an intent, but we don't have a vote.
Yes.
I'm completely comfortable with getting direction to
You
come
know
back.
what we're thinking,
for-
right?
Yes.
Let's hope so.
And so the idea is that this does not have to go to P and Z for
That's correct. They
review of
wouldn't-
the ordinance.
Right, there wouldn't be any ordinance at this point. It would,
Right.
it would just be two documents with two property owners. And then y'all can argue about how we want to handle the two properties, but
Let's
we
not
can,
argue.
we can bring,
Okay.
well, I'm sorry, that's not the right term, debate. My apologies. My
May be
apologies.
accurate, but may not be.
We can fight about it.
Anyway. Okay,
No, y'all are very polite with each other.
most of the
Tonight.
No, y'all are. Y'all have very good debates.
Okay. So, we all done with number 13
I hope so.
Got it.
You
For-
have
for
sufficient
tonight?
direction.
For tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
for tonight?
Thank you.
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
have.
Thank you.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Send me an
Moving on to agenda item 14. Discussion regarding public notice requirements for public hearings. Ashley.
All right, so I will start with the one sheet that was in the packet. This information was actually pulled from the last P and Z meeting. We had a presentation from Bryce Cox with Denton Navarro regarding the public hearing noticing requirements. So this kind of lays out what our noticing requirements are here in the city versus what the state law minimum public hearing noticing requirements are. If you'll look at the chart, sorry, it's a very big chart. There was a lot to consider when it came to noticing options. We currently require the same type of notice before both the P and Z and the city council. The only thing currently in our ordinances that is consistent or exactly the same as state law is the newspaper noticing for prior to the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. We currently also require that for city council. That becomes problematic when we notice something, we try to do our public notices at the same time when it comes to the newspaper, generally to save money. Same thing for mailing out notices. We try to notice both public hearings in one shot. If the Planning and Zoning Commission does not make a recommendation and thus the City Council cannot hold their public hearing, we do have to start that noticing process over again, or at least renotice for the City Council because the P&Z would have had their public hearing. As far as a recommendation from staff would go, we have a couple options here. There's an interesting option if you look at recommended option C. This is the kind of the second to last column on the large spreadsheet. This would entail keeping our noticing procedures as they are, but changing our business process. That would basically state that we're never going to notice for P&Z 1 month and council directly after. We would leave a gap of a meeting in between. And that would allow the Planning and Zoning Commission to do all of their, hold their public hearing, and even if they don't make a recommendation, they could come back and have a special meeting in time for the City Council to hold their planning and zoning, or hold their public hearing consistent with what we had already noticed. So you can kind of read on the second page there the different pros and cons of those options. Obviously, this would probably extend the process a little bit longer, but it would require no ordinance change. So we would just be changing our process. If we're talking about recommended ordinance changes, I think the first thing that would be really easy to do, and I don't think would cause too many waves, would be removing the newspaper requirement before the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think back when we had the Westlake Picayune, those notices were more accessible. People read them. With the Statesman, they're much more expensive, and I'm not sure they make it to the same audience. And so staff would recommend keeping only the minimum required state law newspaper notices, which is the 15th day before the City Council meeting. As far as mailed notice, we have a couple options here. If we were to, one small change we could make is currently we require 30 days notice before, 30 days mailed notice before the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. If that was dropped to 20 days, what that would allow would be the Planning and Zoning Commission to have a meeting 1 month and say, next month we want to have a public hearing, and that would give us time to notice it. It still wouldn't alleviate the city, the after that fact. So them having to make a recommendation before it goes to City Council. So if 20 days is something that the City Council still feels like is adequate notice, if we mailed out something 20 days ahead of a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, that could potentially speed up the process by a month or so, to not require the P&Z to wait a whole 2 months basically before holding that public hearing. There are some other things to consider here. Let's see. We do the 250 feet noticing when we're talking about a subject property. State law is 200 feet. Haven't really run into a lot of issues with that, but where it would come into an issue is if there was a legal protest. And so if a certain percentage of the properties per state law, it's only 200 feet that a certain percentage have to protest. So currently the way we calculate with 250 feet, we would have to do a second calculation, find out who's within 200 feet and make sure we kind of dot all of our I's and cross our T's there. Another thing I'd like to point out is it's not a requirement either before the Planning and Zoning Commission or the City Council to do website notice outside of the 72 hours. That is another option we could deploy to try to increase our noticing presence if we were to potentially reduce some other noticing options. And so we kind of brought sort of an a la carte here for everyone to look at. And of course, we have Dave Bench here with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So of course, if you'd like to weigh in on that as well, I just think that what really gets us cost wise is the mailed notice and the public hearing notice in the newspaper. And so if we can do those one time, I think we're in a better spot. But again, you run into, if you mail it out for one and not the other, the notice isn't quite consistent, and people may run the risk of missing a second public hearing. And so we'd really like some direction from the City Council on how to proceed with drafting of the the changes to the ordinance or the business process.
So, question, does the community impact qualify as a paper of
It does
proper jurisdiction,
not.
circulation?
It's a monthly publication, and I think it has to be a weekly.
It has to be weekly.
Mm-hmm. And so
Okay.
we actually don't have anything else that meets those requirements other than the Statesman. So,
That is truly unfortunate.
and expensive.
Yeah.
Blame the newspaper lobby.
Well, and nobody reads that stuff in the Statesman because there's 5,000 different notices in there, and you never find the ones for Rollingwood, so.
Sure.
If we dropped to 20 days, could we also do, like a Swift 911 or whatever, like a notice that way and on the webpage? I'm just trying to think how we could
Kind of supplement.
make up for the length of notice by providing multiple different ways of providing the notice so that you
Sure.
get the information out
The only
more
concern
thoroughly.
that I think we would have with the SWIFT notification system is not everybody is signed up for it. So when it comes to mailing, that goes to every property owner, I guess, unless they don't have a physical mailbox, then it gets returned. But we don't have every single person signed up for SWIFT notifications. We also,
in addition to the mailing.
sure, and I think that
Yeah.
we could put in some reasonable requirements. I don't know about requiring, the use of the emergency notification. I think that would be probably a policy discussion. I'm sure, there's either too many notices or not enough notices, and so would like to definitely get y'all's direction on that. But that is an option. I think, I can see things moving towards website notice being more prominent, like agendas that didn't used to always be posted on the website. Now it is. And so I think that is somewhere that we can kind of bolster our noticing if we're taking away any other types. And then another note on the 20 or 30 days, sometimes longer is better, but sometimes there's too long and people forget about public hearings as well if it's a month out. And so there's kind of the weighing what's too much and what's not enough notice.
Well, and especially if you have a meeting and you say, we're gonna have a public hearing, but it's not gonna be for 2 months, and then people really,
Lose track.
track.
And
Including the members of the commission holding the meeting.
right?
I have,
Okay.
I have two questions for Ashley.
Okay.
When is a public hearing required for P and Z? I mean, you can have an open meeting, but what triggers it having to be a public hearing?
that is just if there is a change to a zoning
Okay.
provision. So for
Okay.
us, anything in chapter 107 would trigger the requirement of a public hearing.
Okay.
I think also, not to say that those are necessarily outdated rules, but people couldn't always have to speak at every, meeting. That wasn't always a requirement. It is now. And so, we generally just have a public hearing item on a regular meeting agenda. We don't have a separate called public hearing that stands on its own. It's usually just a section of the agenda that's considered public hearings.
So this would mean if we continue to do, well, we have to do that, I guess. We have to allow public comment. But if we have public comment, then it's a public hearing and we have to do the notice? Is that?
No.
Okay,
No, it's just certain things that require that public hearing. You have to
Okay.
call them a public hearing. You have to, and I guess I don't know what you have to do, state the time, open and close, and just to clearly delineate that it's a public hearing and it triggers those noticing provisions.
but that's only when there's an actual zoning change.
Right.
And then the other question is there something like, could we implement, would it be burdensome to implement something like a WhatsApp chat group? Can you do that through email? Allow people to sign up so they can get these notices via email or via WhatsApp. I don't know if cities can legally use WhatsApp as a chat, as a chat group. But for people, it would be a way of having an immediate type notice without putting it in the 911 Swift alert notice,
We already
which I would not.
We already have the email option.
through Swift
Right.
911, we do.
Yeah.
We have, and we're exploring website notices as well that would trigger based on different meetings and stuff. We're still working that out with our website. So if someone was particularly interested in Park Commission, they could sign up. We're working on those right now. We don't have those in place. I think the main consideration would be if it's publicly accessible. And Charlie, you can, if there's
okay.
any additional things to consider when we're talking about how we're
What kind of app you can
communicating
use.
information.
Y'all can communicate pretty much however you want, honestly, so long as we meet the statutory requirements of notice
Okay.
under the statute.
Mm-hmm.
And to,
You can
to
do
be clear-
additional,
right.
even if it's not
Sure,
necessarily.
absolutely, go above and
Mhm.
beyond, yes, ma'am. And to be clear, P and Z does have to hold a quote-unquote public hearing on all regulatory and zoning changes, but the notice is only required when you're gonna do a zoning change.
Okay.
So that's the distinction.
Okay.
Then notice is always required for the city council, regardless if it's a regulatory change or a zoning change. And that's the no later than, I don't know, this legislature writes it weird, but basically 16 days before the public hearing has to be in the newspaper. That's what the statute says
Mm-hmm.
for city council.
Well, I would be in favor of removing all unnecessary newspaper notices.
Okay.
All newspaper notices not required by state law.
Okay. And then as far as mail notice, do we have any thoughts on potentially, so currently it's 30 days in advance through the mail for both Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. And so if we notice together and all goes well, that's not generally an issue, other than the 30-day waiting period. That also, if we end up noticing separately, that doesn't allow P&Z to, make a decision and then council to have that public hearing unless it's already been noticed. They would have to then wait another month and a half before they had theirs. And so is there it would be removing one of the two mailed notice options, and I'm not sure if that's something that the city council would want to do. That would be removing a notice option. There are things like, requiring that you state the date and time of the, city council public hearing at the planning and zoning, or we could put it on the website in a public notices section. We are trying to kind of beef up where we store that information so we have somewhere to direct people ahead of 72 hours before a meeting when something is posted. But there are other things we could deploy, but we'd miss out on that double mail notice.
So the double mailed notice is not required by state law?
It is not. Currently, state law only requires the mail notice, and I believe theirs is only 10 mailed notice to each. So they actually are only each property owner within 200 feet before the 10th day before the hearing at planning and zoning is when the state law requires you send mail notice. And then state law also only requires for public hearing at city council the publication in the newspaper. So they have mailed for P&Z, published for city council. We have both for both currently.
And I don't know how it affects staff. So your mailed notice, do you keep two different records? Do you keep a record of everybody within 200 feet and then a record of everybody outside the 200 feet that gets notice? The reason I ask this question is because under state law, a protest doesn't go into effect unless it's by a certain percentage of people who are within 200 feet.
Mhm.
And so if it's, because your notice is 250, those people outside the 200-foot range don't count towards the protest requirement. So I don't know how you guys,
We would
how
need
y'all deal with
to.
that now, but
Mhm.
that is an issue. That is an issue when you have a different
Mhm.
footage requirements.
Mhm.
My recollection was that it went from 200 to 250 feet because the size of our lots is bigger.
Yeah.
And that it did not include
Mhm.
impacted when we said only 200 feet, that there were people that were potentially impacted that were not noticed because they were beyond the 200 feet.
Well,
Sure.
even if lots are bigger, 200 feet is still 200 feet from that lot line. It's not from the center of the lot, it's from the outer edge of the lot, so it doesn't matter how big or small your lots are, 200 feet from that lot is still gonna be the same distance.
But you may
Right,
only
but
have
it's-
one
it's
lot
fewer-
next to
right.
it that takes up
Oh,
that
I
whole
see what you're saying.
250
Yeah.
instead of,
So it's fewer,
But-
fewer
okay.
people
Yeah.
that,
So okay, so perhaps another lot owner might be impacted because the lot's bigger? Okay, it doesn't matter.
Right.
None of that matters. The only thing that
Mhm.
matters is
there's
that,
just
we would
Is it-
need
fewer
to,
people noticed.
I'm not saying to change it, I'm just saying that that's an issue
Right.
that we have.
Sure.
Fewer people are notified if you say 200 feet.
That is true.
Because,
Yeah.
right. And as staff, we need to calculate both of those so that if the protests begin, we know when that triggers the legal protest amount. So we would have to keep a list of both so we could be sure that we're satisfying that provision. We also, one other thing that we do differently is. Mhm.
to reduce that period required for the notices so that we can keep it.
okay.
Sure. Yes, so yeah, that would be one thing that we are recommending is to reduce that 30 to 20 days.
If you have
Yeah,
questions, you need to go up
yes,
to the
please.
mic so that Desiree can hear when she's doing the minutes.
I think what we're trying to do here is to, Dave Bench, One Randolph Place, I think what we're trying to do here is speed the process from snail pace to turtle pace. So, so, speaking as a turtle, I would like to see this period between the time that we have to announce a public notice be reduced to 20 days as opposed to 30, because this skipping, this leapfrogging month to month really impacts the continuity of the discussion. And it's even difficult for members of the P&Z Commission to consider what was talked about 2 months prior. So if anything else happens, or I'd love to see that. It just makes the process go so much better if we can do that, if we can get our discussions to continue on a month-by-month basis instead of having to leapfrog a month. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what do you need from us on this, Ashley?
So I guess we could go notice by notice, city council. So I think we've established newspaper. So newspaper, we're going to keep the at least 16-day prior to the public, the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm sorry, before. Sorry, now I'm all turned around. Before city council. So the newspaper notice for city council will remain as is, removing the newspaper requirement for Planning and Zoning Commission. Seems like we have consensus on that. Okay. Mailed notice, are we wanting to keep mailed notice for both Planning and Zoning and City Council? That would be our next, is do we want a mailed notice before each of those? And then we can go to if we would like to lower the time frame.
I think we need to make sure we have a good alternative if we don't mail notices to get
Mhm.
everybody aware of it before we take that away.
Sure.
And given all of the things that are gonna be coming to planning and zoning, I think it would be prudent to keep the mailed notice. People have gotten them recently and they're used to getting them.
Sure.
I would reduce it to 20 days. I would recommend reducing it to 20 days, but keeping the mailed notice until we've identified some other notice method
Noticing,
that
okay.
would be as effective.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there is one.
And if we're, how do we feel about changing the business process to hopefully circumvent having to do double mail notice? So if we, generally, currently, when there's something in the residential district, we end up mailing the whole city. So if we continue to publish both public hearings, there's still always that chance that the second one doesn't happen because planning and zoning doesn't make a recommendation. Are we interested in changing our process where we don't put it on the next council meeting, we skip a month to try to get all of our, ensure that our noticing doesn't have to be redone because the Planning and Zoning Commission didn't make a recommendation? Does that make sense? I think I confused myself too.
Well, it doesn't seem like that adds to the, I mean, if you put 2 notices on one mail out, and then the second one doesn't happen, then you have to send another notice for the
Second one.
second
For the
notice.
second.
So it doesn't seem like it saves you anything. I mean, like, if you put them both on the first notice, you may only have to do the one notice. But if you don't put them both on there, then you have to do 2 notices.
Sure.
So it doesn't seem like it really saves you anything to not try and put them on, both on the one notice.
Right. I guess the only time it would is if you, as opposed to not making the recommendation and then having to renotice and make sure you still fit those days in, you would say be doing 45 days instead of potentially 60 days. So it only helps in the case that P&Z doesn't make a recommendation and we're going to be renoticing anyways. So I think we're good to stick with how we currently notice in the mail, both public hearings, and kind of hope for the best and that they can both hold them.
Encourage P&Z to make their recommendations, so that's not an issue.
Sure.
Well,
Oh, I was gonna ask, how long does it take to prepare a public notice?
Generally, if we try to get as clear direction as we can in the meeting, and so it shouldn't take long. It shouldn't take us but a couple days, and then we have the printing cost or the printing time, right? If they have a timeline to get our public notices out, so I would say comfortably we'd like 5 days to have them out the door and start that timeline. And
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I was asking is because we're gonna cut to 20 days or whatever the proposal was, like, if you know at a meeting, at the end of the meeting, we're gonna have it, you can put it up on a website like right away. Or I was trying to figure out how fast you could do that so that you still have, okay, the mailer doesn't go out as fast, but if you're checking the website and stuff, the notice is there.
we could probably have it on the website, and I would say 2 days. We like to have legal review of what's being posted in the language, just so that we're sure that we're encompassing everything that was requested. So
The public notice, having the deadline for the paper, I mean, they always have a multiple day in advance requirement that you get everything in and that the
Okay.
copy is approved and everything else, so that
adds
just getting,
another.
yeah.
So we have it usually way in advance of.
Right,
when
and
we send it anyway.
we've been trying to send our mail notice and do the newspaper notice at the exact same time, just to avoid that, it's a holiday, you had to get it to us 4 days ago if you wanted it in the newspaper today. And so we've tried to get ahead of it that way, and I think that's something we can still manage.
and I had a question, I think, when you poll P&Z for attendance, it seemed to me we had sent a mailer out and then polled after the mailer had gone out and didn't have a quorum. And so how do we fix that?
I think you're either way, so you're either polling for someone's availability 40 days in advance, which most people will go, yeah, I'm sure I can be there, and then things change, as time gets closer. So I think either way, I think it depends on if they say at their meeting, we want to have a public hearing at our next regular meeting, and then we know the date that is, we generally get the notice going, and then as it gets closer, we're trying to confirm. But you're right, if we don't have a quorum, then the notice was for naught.
Yeah,
So.
I was gonna say the solution to that is having folks on your boards and committees that commit to being at the regular meetings that are published and known well in advance.
Yes.
And that they be
Or,
there.
or having
That's
alternates.
the solution to that problem.
Can we have alternates on P and Z?
No, we're not authorized to have alternates on P and Z.
We can for Board of Adjustment, but not for P
Right,
and Z?
because it's authorized by statute. Actually statute requires it for Board of Adjustments.
Okay. Anyway, that was
Well,
I
we
thought that would fix
can enforce the no-show.
Absolutely.
Dave Bench, One Randolph. I think what, in our next P and Z meeting, I think we'll bring this up as an agenda item. Maybe it's an opportunity for people to decide that they can't make every meeting and that maybe they need to be thinking about having somebody else come in their place. I'm with you, I agree. I think you guys are here all the time, and you're making it, we should make it too. So we'll do better. We'll do better.
Okay. Do you need anything else?
What else?
I think we have what we need. We'll bring something back next month that is for sure eliminating the additional newspaper notice, try to make some modest amendments to the mailed notice, and we'll bring back a draft next month. And we may consult P&Z liaison between now and then and talk through the process.
And maybe think about the website, if there's some
Mhm.
term you want to put in that.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think things are probably moving that way, so we would just be ahead of the curve and trying to tighten up our website notice, so I agree with that. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 15, discussion and possible action on the commercial code update project calendar.
This is,
Ashley,
You
Brooke,
want-
whoever's.
Go for it.
okay, go for it. I met with Ashley and Bryce to work on how we most efficiently get a draft of the ordinance changes that are recommended for the commercial corridor out to P&Z and to the council and to the community. And this is the proposal we've come up with. It involves at the head end meetings between Bryce, Tom Farrell, who was chair of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force, myself, and Ryan Clinton, who was also a member of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force, to give guidance to Bryce on the recommendations and the background, so he can get the benefit of that background where it's not, where he needs it. He's asked for that, and he's sent to us a list of issues and questions that he needs filler for, and we're gonna meet with him this Friday, and then again next week, if necessary. Once we've gone through that process, then we'll decide. You'll see down, joint workshop. That is, to be decided. It depends on, if there are holes after we meet with Bryce that he needs direction for, that wasn't a part of the comprehensive plan recommendation, then we'll know it by that time, and we'll have to work in that joint workshop. Then the rest of the dates would follow with Bryce delivering a first draft. That's the April 24th date. The Commercial Corridor Task Force and the city staff to provide comments on that. We get Charlie's firm to do a revision. Once those comments come in, there'll be a second draft that will be circulated for comments and feedback. Then by June 14th, a final draft will be prepared. That is the draft that would then be published, or on which there would be a public hearing held at P&Z for P&Z's consideration, and then it would come to the council. So those last two dates are not outlined here, but this is the proposal. There's no action needed tonight. This is just an advisory about how we're going about it. Depending on where where we are before next council meeting, we may come back with a more formal draft so that everybody can get these dates on their calendar for this work to be done. So that's where we are. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there any action required? Okay. Thank you for
That's
working
good.
on that, Brooke.
Oh, thanks.
All right. Moving on.
The next item
Well,
is.
no, I'm asking, are we ready to move on?
And if there are no questions, I'm ready to move on.
Okay. Pulling up agenda item number 16. Discussion and possible action regarding the formation of a comprehensive residential code review committee.
Yes. This has been before the council previously. Our Councilmember Glasheen generated this idea and did a lot of work in getting it to the place where it is today. Dave Bench is taking over, presenting a formal resolution that would create this task force to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission has unanimously approved it at their last meeting, and so it's here before the council for approval. The, as you'll see, there are recommended 6 people who would form that committee. They would have a time frame, hopefully, to convene by April 1 and work through October 1, and that would be subject to change depending on how that work goes. The authority would be to acquire, comment, consider a number of issues that are on the last 2 pages of this resolution, to acquire public comment on that, to formulate a policy on that, to present a policy on that to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then to ultimately, if Planning and Zoning moves forward on it, then those recommendations would be brought back to council for action. And I will defer to Dave if he would like to add anything further regarding the committee.
Dave Bench, 1 Randolph. The only thing that I would add to that is that the starting point would be the comprehensive plan that had already been conducted in the 2021 timeframe. We would use that as our starting point and then measure it for gaps against what that list is that Councilwoman Brooke had brought up, and then make from that formulate a go-forward plan for collecting community input before going any further. So just that the starting point would be with the previously executed comprehensive plan.
Not the plan, but the survey for the plan.
The survey,
Yes.
excuse me,
Because-
you're right.
Because the whole reason
Thank
we're
you.
doing this is
The
because
plan's
the
the plan.
plan did not include the residential stuff. So,
You're right.
Right.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. The
Well,
survey.
no, I just-
There's a lot of stuff there in the survey that has not
Right.
been incorporated in the comprehensive plan, and
Exactly.
we're gonna mine it.
Yes, yes. Just to be clear for people that are not familiar with what has happened.
Thank you.
Okay.
And so what is being asked in this item is for council approval of the formation of the Comprehensive Residential Code Review Committee according to the resolution contained in the packet.
So, we have a motion?
Move to approve it.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? I would like, just for the record, so people know, who are not here but may be interested, if somebody could explain the people that have been recommended to be on and why they have been recommended.
I will defer to Councilmember Glasheen for that. I think you talked with these people.
I did, and Phil McDuffie did reach out to different people in the community who had, demonstrated strong interest or leadership on these issues, and who had qualifications that were fitting and suitable for service to make a positive contribution. And there were, the folks who we reached out to and recommended, or folks who agreed to serve. And we were trying to strike a balance on the committee of various interests and property owners, and come up with what I'd call a blue ribbon panel, which I think we succeeded in doing, of people who were, capable and being informed, capable of having opinions, but also would not necessarily be accused of being some committee that was designed just to rubber stamp some predetermined outcome. Instead, I think it's a group that has diverse views and which would have healthy debate and, create a process that would lead to, tested, proposed solutions. So that was the goal. And I think, it could always be more diverse, include more interests, but also we're trying to prevent it from becoming unwieldy. So that's how we started.
And there is language in there that if there's a possibility of adding other people or things like that.
Sure.
In the resolution that's being proposed, so.
Well, to me, for the record, just so if anybody else is listening or wants to listen to this later on, Tom Farrell was the chairman of our comprehensive plan strike force. He's former mayor, he's done everything in the city for decades and knows a lot. So him as chair, Dave Bench is the current chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, has recently built a home in Rollingwood. Alex Robinette is an architect, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Who has built her beautiful home here in Rollingwood. Yes.
Yes.
Also. Duke
Well noted.
Duke Garwood, also a longtime Rollingwood resident, an architect who has built a number of homes in Rollingwood, and has really done an excellent job of building to the lot, building something that is
Please.
consistent with the neighborhood and fits into the neighborhood. So he's got excellent background in that. Ryan Clinton was also on the task force and was a big participant, stuck through the whole process along with Brooke, and Tom. Jeff Marks, I do not know as well. He was
Jeff
Jeff-
Marks is a more recent resident of Rollingwood. I believe he and his wife have lived here for about 2 years, but he became very interested in, well, it's been more than that now, because it's been at least 3 or 4, but he participated just on an advisory basis to the comprehensive plan task force, is a data scientist, and his 4 kids and
4 small children.
yes,
Yeah.
and has just been an active member of the community on a number of issues.
And both
So,
Kevin and I spoke with him.
represents the lower, represents the younger
Right.
segment of our residential.
And he,
All right.
as she said, he's just gone through the building process. He's an excellent data analyst, has done a lot of in-depth work. And, he's an alum of my alma mater as well, so he knows a little bit.
And his wife, if you look at the
Calling him a
comprehensive plan,
I didn't call him a Yankee. I didn't call me a Yankee either.
in the comprehensive plan, there is a PowerPoint that is Envision Rollingwood, and Jeff's wife produced that, so she is an artist and a professional in her own right as well.
It's a good group.
It's a good group.
All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure that everybody had some background on who was being proposed and what their capabilities and background was, so.
Right.
All right, we have a motion, right? Yes, we did that already? Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. All right. On to agenda item number 17, update on the Nixon Pleasant Drainage Project.
All right, so we, I think, are getting close to consensus. We are in the final stages of our stakeholder sign-off. Currently, we have one of our three stakeholders who is good to go with the plans as proposed. We have two others that should be coming in here pretty shortly. We're just waiting on finalizing some easement language and some additional requests for inclusion on the plans. We think we'll be able to satisfy most, if not all, of those concerns on the new set of plans that we do intend to submit this week to all of our stakeholders. So we are close. Once all three of them have signed off and are good to go, we will proceed with the easement acquisition process, and then hopefully shortly thereafter bid and construction. So I think we're there. I know we're all very eager to get to the end of this project, and we are here too. So I think we're close.
All right. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Kevin, do you have any questions? Kevin Shell?
I just want to thank everybody for still hanging in there, and I will hold you to that delivery this week. Thank you, Ashley.
You got it.
Do we have that kind of control?
All right. Okay. Moving on. Agenda item number 18, update regarding the City of Rolling Wood's allocation from the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund.
So at long last, I think we've now passed 3 resolutions and signed up for 5 or 6 different of the settlements. But we got our first allocation. We don't yet have clarity on how or when or how many or from which they're from at this point, but we got $1,400, which is cool for Rolling Wood. We do have an idea of possible uses. They have given a whole slew of kind of things that they're allowing these funds to be spent on. I think for us, we're likely looking at training for opioid related public safety measures or possible purchase of Narcan or things like that. And so we will be bringing back more details. I'm sure they'll be releasing more. We don't yet know about reporting or anything. And so we're going to hold on to the allocation until we have a little better idea of how we're going to need to be tracking these expenditures and how we need to report them. But big bucks. Let's do it.
Can we get, I don't know if we're gonna bring this back for anything next month, if we can figure out what we can spend it on, but I would be interested in getting, recommendation from the police department on if there's something that you all would like to see done with the money, if you have any recommendations, things that would be helpful to you, because I feel like you guys are the ones that are the most likely to actually be exposed to an incident that would qualify for the use of these funds.
Right, and we have talked about it, and that's where we have discussed whether it's purchasing additional Narcan. But I think for our community, it would benefit us to be able to do an outreach to our kids and do some type of also training.
Ask if there was anything that we could do at the middle school, or, I know that you all have done stuff in the past with training and outreach at the middle school, and that just seems like that would be a really good place to.
Right, we can touch base
try and
with
do
Eames
some of that.
ISD. I actually just forwarded a video to Ashley and Desiree. Eames ISD actually just did a very good presentation on fentanyl in January. It is on the Eames ISD website
Okay.
for parents to be able to see. But I agree. I mean, we need to see I can touch base with things I see to see what we can do as far as the middle school, because it's gonna affect them as well.
Right, it just seemed like that would be a good opportunity for us to, of the places where we could make a difference, that seems like that would be one of the.
I agree,
The
and,
best
and,
ones.
I mean, to me, I would rather see the funds be used for that public outreach. And, I mean, we have Narcan on hand, already, and, that all of our patrol officers have with them. But I think we need to, touch it at home.
Well, if we did that, wouldn't we want to do that in conjunction, not only with Eames ISD, but also with Westlake Hill? Since I'm assuming they got funds from.
I think that's a great idea. The training shouldn't have to, it should be able to cross jurisdictional borders and be helpful for
Right.
everyone. So I absolutely don't see why not. That's a great idea.
And we can also see with Travis County SO, because Travis County is actually the SROs inside the schools. And we can, I mean, we do our training there together. I mean, we go to all of the lockdowns. When we do our lockdowns, we're with Travis County and Westlake Hills PD and ourselves. So, I mean, we definitely can have a discussion to see what is the best way to touch all communities,
Right.
not just ours.
Sure.
I'm just saying, if we're restricted on how we can use the funds, we're just trying to figure out what we can do that has the best,
We got
the greatest impact.
$1,400?
Yes,
Okay.
roughly.
Well,
But that's
from-
why I'm saying
from
maybe
the
if
first
we
one.
pool that with Westlake Hills, and she's saying with Travis and whatever.
No, it's fine, it's great. I think we should talk about it some more.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we have any, do any of these, do we have any opioid offenses that go to municipal court? I'm just remembering being, when I was a city judge, municipal judge, underage cigarette smoking was in the city's jurisdiction, but we don't have any enforcement, we don't have any municipal
No, municipal
laws that address
opioid, no.
opioids. Okay, all right.
Okay. That was just the first settlement. There are other settlement agreements
Yes.
to come, so there
Hopes.
may be more funds than that
And
to be addressed.
I would also think, and I'll talk to my neighbors who have junior high school and high school kid ages, if there's something they might recommend we do as a city on those issues.
Right. And the only other thing, as far as like Eames ISD, we also have kids that are in private schools, and so we want to be able to reach them as well. And that's why finding a way to kind of maybe, like I said, kind of do more of like a public outreach versus just an ISD.
Yeah.
Right.
Because then, like I said, we have a lot of our kids in private
Sure.
schools as well.
Okay, Amy?
Amy Patillo, 3 Rockaway Cove. So one thing to think about is that one of the things Travis County has done with Narcan doses last year is finding strategic places to distribute them. So one of the places is in the event production world. Most people who are in event production right now, who have been at some different spots where the county judge has come and done the distribution, now have Narcan with them at all times. So I can save one life almost at any point in time. I just keep mine with me. I haven't had to use it. I'm thankful. But just there could be strategic ways to think about not only our police having those, but there's other people in our community who might be the people who would first be there, like at the pool. That's a big community center. I don't know if any of the private businesses would want to do it and have a few people with those on hand. But I think the county has been strategic in thinking about how to create broader pools of people who are ready to respond in that way, because it's as simple as taking off a cap and spraying something up someone's nose. I mean, I suppose there is some liability with it, but at this point, that's what I've seen.
That's
So
a good idea. We could notify our business community where locally Narcan is available.
yeah, I mean, there just may be something with that, because and to see what the county would say as well, on how they're being strategic in using those funds. So.
Good, thank you.
Thank. Okay. Any other discussion? All right. Agenda item number 19. Discussion and possible action to amend Rollingwood Ordinance Section 2-56 regarding application of Robert's Rules of Order in city meetings. Brooke.
This is, in our debate about whether we are going to apply Robert's Rules of Order or not. The City Ordinance 2-56 requires that Robert's Rules of Order be applied in city council meetings, but we don't actually do that. We've had, the mayor has presented a proposal that would have a stricter order of business. But as I look at the ordinances, we have a general order of business in section 2-64. We could, so that would have to be amended if we do what it is, if we were to follow up on the mayor's suggested order. But what we could do is to apply the flexible use of Robert's Rules of Order that is found in the Rules of Order for the Utility Commission. And that is this, on the second page of the memo, they have a subsection E in their Rules of Order that says applicability of Robert's Rules of Order. Any question of order or procedure not covered by this section shall be decided according to the latest edition of Robert's Rules of Order insofar as it may be applicable. And so if we substitute that E for section E, subsection E in our ordinance 2-56, then we have flexible application of Robert's Rules of Order where no other order is stated in our code. And that is the recommendation that I would make, is that we amend subsection 2-56E to adopt the language that is found in subsection 2-2223E, so that we have flexible use of Robert's Rules of Order for city council meetings.
You know, when the mayor first brought up this issue, I also had an agenda item, and he asked me to take it down because we had, or actually, he didn't ask me to take it down. He asked that we just carry one forward on whether we amend the Robert's Rules of Order in our rules. And I deferred to him because he's the mayor and he has to run the meetings, generally speaking, and so I think it's nice to defer to his request on rules, on how he conducts them. But my proposal that I had before he made his proposal was that we change our rules to where the default is not Robert's Rules of Orders, and then we can impose Robert's Rules of Orders in whatever form we want to, if we need to, during a meeting. So rather than just conducting our meetings in violation of the ordinances, we just say we're not going to follow it unless we have a motion to apply it at a meeting.
I think that's what this amendment would do.
Okay, that's what
this amendment would do.
Okay. I wasn't sure, but that's what I had proposed a couple months ago, but I just set it aside because I wanted the mayor to get to make his proposal.
And we can defer this till the mayor can be with us if we want to.
I think it'd be appropriate to do so since he has thoughts about it. But I think it's a good proposal.
So I will, no action is being requested on this item at this time.
Okay.
Mayor Person, would you be willing to entertain public comment on items not on the agenda at the end of the meeting? I wasn't able to be here at the beginning of the meeting.
Yes. Go ahead.
Great. If you're good
Okay, no, that's the last,
About to conclude.
that's about the,
Amy
before I
Patil-
ask for a motion to adjourn, so
Yeah,
go
Amy
ahead.
Patil, 3 Rockaway Cove. I had texted Gavin to see if he would entertain this as well, and he's not here, so I appreciate it.
And I let the mayor pro tem
Oh,
know you'd be,
thank
we're at
you.
another meeting and would be here.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You bet.
The main thing is, I just wanted to see if I could take a moment to talk about MOPAC South. It's not on the agenda. It has been a year and 3 months since the city has kind of last actively engaged. January of 2022 was the last public comment period. So I'm hearing rumblings that at the March 29th CTRMA board meeting, there could be an update on MOPAC South. I don't know if they will actually happen. I don't know what the content would be. I'm just hearing rumblings. Regardless of whether that's true, I think we're probably close to CTRMA moving forward with things becoming public. They've been doing something for over a year on this. And so in the past, when I was on the council, we had a standing agenda item related to MOPAC South that allowed the council a lot of flexibility to respond quickly to the reality that transportation things can move very quickly. And also because the council only meets once a month and other entities are meeting in between those time periods, it can be difficult to get for another entity to have their meeting and then also for the council to have gotten something on the agenda. And so that standing agenda item kind of gave that flexibility. I understand this council has put in place a task force that's also able to meet. And so a suggestion I have is potentially just in anticipation of what could be a faster moving or higher level of information that may come out to the community once this starts moving again, would be to consider some type of standing meeting that, even if it doesn't happen of the task force, would be maybe the week after the CTRMA regular meeting, which is typically the last week of the month. And then that would give time for the task force to meet and you all to see what's going on and be prepared at the council meeting in the middle of the month to be able to receive a recommendation. And if you continue to choose to have an outside law firm like Bickerstaff providing advice, gives them time to be, from the point that the CTRMA board is releasing information, to be ready about 2.5 weeks later for the council meeting. So it's just something to consider that once it starts moving, like in the past, it can become very consuming and it's a lot of information and people in our community want to be informed. It can, really impact a lot of the property values here. And so the city has had a history of participating. The city is a stakeholder, and so the city has a unique position that other nonprofits don't have to be able to comment. And so I think it's been important for the city to use the voice that it has as a stakeholder in the process and use the full power of that. So I would appreciate y'all's consideration just of looking at kind of what the reality of the timing may be and the city being prepared to engage again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you see, I have a question. Is there any discussion with the I-35 project?
We can't have,
Ma'am, this is public comment. This isn't on the agenda. We
I
can't.
just have a question for her.
Right, but if we get into discussion, that's on a non-agenda item.
is it something that we could talk about after the meeting?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, that would be my preference, because this is not posted on the agenda.
Thank you for receiving
And
my
so the only
comment.
comments in public comment can be put it on another agenda or give a factual response.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, anything else that we need to, any questions on reports? I had a question, did we lose our water usage report on here?
Not on yes, I don't think we've had that one on for a few years.
No, it hasn't been that long.
I can go back and check.
Okay, anyway, I went
Okay.
looking for it this time and I didn't find it. I was just curious what
Okay.
our,
We'll,
what our water usage was, so.
okay, we'll look back at that.
Okay. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very fast.
Thank you.
So this is
All